What followed was much simpler. Ling Han branded the two patterns on the primal chaos celestial core. Now, the two mystical powers had completely become his celestial techniques. He made a comparison. It was still destructive energy that was the most awesome, occupying the largest territory. Then, it was primal chaos divine lightning and heavenly Tao flames. However, the design for the primal chaos divine lightning covered the territory it occupied fully, while heavenly Tao flames was the same as destructive energy. This design wasn't big, but it occupied a large area. Obviously, this was territory it was keeping in reserve. Whether it was destructive energy or heavenly Tao flames, they were both incomplete, far from reaching the height that they should have. Thus, they occupied a large area, but their designs were extremely small. It was the primal chaos divine lightning that was more realistic. It occupied as much space as it could. In other words, it didn't have any more room for further advancement. However, the primal chaos divine lightning was already unbelievably strong in the first place, and could increase Ling Han's battle prowess by 5 heavens. The black light of illusion was also very realistic, occupying the same space as itself, but among the 4 patterns, it occupied the smallest space. In other words, its potential was the smallest, and there was already no room for improvement. Even so, Ling Han did some calculations. Even if they were all this size, his celestial core could only be inscribed with 12 patterns. From this, it could be seen that the black light of illusion was also very, very awesome. It just couldn't compare to the other 3. Ling Han stood up, raised his hand, and a bolt of lightning struck out, surging with the shards of terrifying seals. Primal chaos divine lightning. After launching an attack, Ling Han once again raised his hand. Primal chaos divine lightning struck continuously, and accompanying it was the corresponding pattern on the primal chaos celestial core dimming. After striking 12 times of divine lightning in one go, the pattern completely dimmed, and Ling Han was no longer able to strike primal chaos divine lightning for the 13th time. A smile appeared on his face. Now, the number of times he could use the primal chaos divine lightning was greatly increased, which naturally increased his explosive power by a whole lot as well. I can now be considered a 4 inscriptions. Based on the remaining space of the celestial core, I have already walked halfway out of the late stage of core formation tier. With the support of the celestial core, my power has reached between 27 and 28 heavens. All right. Ling Han's eyes lit up. At this moment, he would be able to sweep aside the likes of Shi Yongming. Even if he encountered a real imperial son and imperial daughter, he would at least be able to fight them to a tie. Now, I want to find the most fundamental, high-level energy. At least, it has to be heavenly Tao flames level. Time to go back. Ling Han determined the direction and returned the way he came. Strangely, the true self-tier assassin still didn't make a move. Could it be that he had really died here? This was extremely likely. This place was strange and dangerous, so it wouldn't be strange if a true self-tier died here. A few hours later, Ling Han returned to the coast. He saw that many people had stayed here, trying various methods to cross the sea, but it was all useless. Instead, a few people were killed by the corrosive power. Ling Han, you're back. Qi Dao immediately greeted him. This was a man who liked to hide his emotions. Even though he usually didn't speak much, that was because he wasn't familiar with him yet. Once they were familiar with each other, this guy would speak too much. Ling Han smiled and said, "Brother Qi, I'll talk to you later." He took a slight breath, then shouted loudly, "Shi Yongming, get out here and accept your death." After this roar, the whole area was instantly left with dead silence. What was going on? Someone actually dared to provoke the Buddha Son? Shi Yongming was resting with his eyes closed, and when he heard this, he couldn't help but sneer. He stood up and said calmly, "Ling Han, are you dreaming? Haha. A mere lowly commoner. You can only talk tough." Lu Yiming sneered. Ling Han cracked a smile. "The both of you can come at me together. I will fight both of you alone." When these words were said, it instantly caused a bout of laughter. Ling Han was indeed powerful. In the past, he had been the #1 elite of the cauldron forging tier, and even the imperial son had been defeated by him. However, everyone was in the core formation tier now, so unless you reached the consummate level of the core formation tier, what right did you have to challenge an imperial son? A Buddha son was an imperial son. Ling Han, you are too arrogant. You can only act arrogantly in the North Heavenly Realm, because the people there are too weak. Now that you've come to our West Heavenly Realm, it's best to keep a low profile. Everyone said one after another, not having the slightest bit of positive feelings towards Ling Han. Prejudice and discrimination due to territory was still quite serious. Shi Yongming stepped out and said, "You've only mastered an extremely powerful defensive technique. In terms of battle prowess, I can suppress you single-handedly." Xiao Linghan shot out a punch. Pong! Shi Yongming greeted that with a palm strike, but just as palm and fist made contact, he was sent flying. Thankfully, his raw power was also as high as 28 heavens. In fact, he was just that bit stronger than Ling Han. However, he was at a disadvantage because he had not used a secret technique, and that was why he was inferior to Ling Han in terms of battle prowess and was sent flying. With a turn of his body, he had already steadied his footing and stood in midair. However, after this attack, a dead silence fell once more. Who would have thought that the power of Ling Han's punch would be so domineering? Qi Minghan's beautiful eyes lit up. She had always had a high opinion of Ling Han. After all, Ling Han was the only cultivator with an 8-star aptitude. As long as his cultivation level could keep up, he would definitely be inconceivably powerful. This guy broke through to the late stage of core formation tier, Qi Dao said. Hiss, what a monster! Once he advanced into the late stage of core formation tier, his battle prowess can reach such a terrifying extent. Shi Yongming's expression changed drastically. He had just been boasting, saying that he could suppress Ling Han with one hand. But what happened? Ling Han sent him flying with a single punch. However, only a dozen over days had passed, so how had Ling Han's strength increased to such a terrifying extent? Late stage of core formation tier. He used a mystical power from the Buddhist race and finally discovered that Ling Han had improved further. Heavens, he had just newly advanced into the late stage of the core formation tier, so how could his battle prowess be as strong as this? Are you even human? Ling Han smiled faintly. How does this punch taste like? Hearing his mockery, Shi Yongming's face instantly flushed red and then paled. He flew into a humiliated rage and roared loudly. A Buddha halo formed behind his head, instantly transforming into the golden Arhat, as he charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han was completely unafraid as he faced his opponent head-on. Pong! 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 After exchanging more than 10 blows in a row, Ling Han didn't back down in the slightest, nor did he fall into a disadvantage. This caused Shi Yongming to feel disbelief. Previously, he had exchanged blows with Ling Han, and knew that though Ling Han was freakish, his raw power was only around 19 or 20 heavens, but now, it was more than 27 heavens, and looked to be close to 28 heavens. This was practically not inferior to him at all. He had only advanced one minor level, yet his power could actually increase so drastically? Ling Han laughed loudly. Come, have a taste of this punch. He threw another punch, but when his fist was thrown, lightning blazed. Primal Chaos Divine Lightning. With the strike, pong! Shi Yongming's whole person was instantly sent flying, completely unable to resist. Shi Yongming was sent flying. Pong! He landed heavily on the ground. Hiss, when everyone saw this, they all inhaled sharply. That was because not only had Shi Yongming been sent flying, there was also a wound on his lower abdomen. It was presently fuming with burnt smoke, and one could vaguely see the flicker of lightning. It should be known that in the state of Golden Arhat, Shi Yongming's battle prowess and defense, especially defense, would be greatly improved, but his physical body was actually pierced by a single strike from Ling Han. Just how terrifying was his attack power? The strike was truly astounding. Qi Menghan was also astonished. She was an imperial daughter, and her battle prowess was even above that of the so-called Buddha son, Shi Yongming. She was also completely capable of defeating Shi Yongming with a single strike. However, what cultivation level was she at? Consummate level of core formation tier. What about Ling Han? Was this the aptitude of an 8-star genius? How impressive. And those like Lu Yiming, Lu Kaiji, and the 2 members of the 10,000 Thunder Imperial clan all had extremely ugly expressions. Too strong. How could there be such a freak? Ling Han's killing intent was on full display. This Shi Yongming was not just trying to suppress him, but also harboring killing intent towards him. Then who cares if you are Buddha's son or Imperial son? Die! Even a force like the Battle God Palace was going all out against him, so it was fine even if there was the Buddhist race added in. Shi Yongming got to his feet. Blood was flowing from the wound on his lower abdomen, but it was golden in color. Furthermore, it was still glowing, as if he was a god. He could not believe that he was actually no match for Ling Han. Previously, he had clearly been able to easily thrash Ling Han. However, the latter had relied on a strange method to weaken his battle prowess by a few heavens, and also had an awesome defense, so he could only suppress him but could not defeat him. This change was too fast and too sudden that he could not believe it. How could this be? How could this be? His hands were tightly clenched into fists, flames practically leaping out of his eyes. I'll send you on your way. Ling Han charged over, his expression cold and emotionless. In your dreams. Shi Yongming gritted his teeth and made up his mind. His forehead suddenly split open, and a majestic light instantly burst forth, making even Ling Han feel slightly apprehensive. He immediately stopped. Ah! Shi Yongming shouted loudly. His right hand stretched into his brow, and actually grabbed out a demon-subduing staff. This demon-subduing staff was glowing all over, and there were multiple seals on it. It looked incredibly solemn and austere. Why does this demon-subduing staff give me an incredibly terrifying pressure? This looks like a true self-tier. No. A spiritual transformation tier-level precious treasure. I understand now. This isn't a physical body, but a spirit body. How could that be? Without reaching the spiritual transformation tier, how could one possibly form a spirit body? That must be the power of the Buddhist race. Everyone was engaged in a heated discussion, all of them very excited, because this kind of method was an eye-opener for them. Even Lu Yiming nodded and said, the Buddhist race is most skilled in the aspect of the soul. They were actually able to implant a spirit body into the mind of a cultivator at the core formation tier. This technique is truly amazing. Once the spirit body appears, Ling Han definitely won't be able to endure it. Lu Kaiji laughed. Ling Han! Shi Yongming shouted loudly, his eyes shooting out golden light, appearing to be extremely furious. That was because he had taken out the spirit body in advance, and this originally could only be used by spiritual transformation tier elites. If he took it out now, it would cause massive damage to the spirit body. However, he didn't want to lose, nor did he want to die. Thus, he had to use his trump card. Once the spirit body appeared, what core formation tier wouldn't be razed to the ground? You will pay the price for all that you have done, he forced out through gritted teeth. Who cares about how the Buddhist race was supposed to avert anger? He was going to commit murder. Ling Han smiled faintly as he silently unleashed the black light of illusion. After splitting it up, the mystical power was finally able to unleash its true might. Otherwise, the target would be awakened the moment it took effect, completely burying the effectiveness of this mystical power. If Shi Yongming was calm, then he was the Buddhist race prodigy, so it was still possible for him to defend against Ling Han. However, in this state of losing control of his anger, he was naturally immediately affected, falling into the illusion that he had created. Everyone was anticipating Shi Yongming's sudden burst of power. After all, Shi Yongming had even unleashed his spirit body, so he was definitely going to start a massacre and completely suppress Ling Han. However, why was there still no movement? Multiple gazes focused on Shi Yongming. What was going on with this guy? Had he had a stroke? Struck dumb? Because Ling Han didn't make a move at all. No one associated Shi Yongming's dazed state with Ling Han. However, it was also because of this that everyone was at a loss and confused. This was too strange, wasn't it? Ling Han paid no further attention to Shi Yongming. This guy now had a spirit body in his hands, and his attack power far surpassed that of the core formation tier. Thus, he just let him stand there and waited for the might of the spirit body to disappear. Ling Han could see very clearly with his eye technique. After this demon subduing staff was unleashed, its energy was continuously draining away. Thus, as time passed, it would soon become a piece of trash. Next, it's the two of you. Ling Han set his eyes on Lu Kaiji and Lu Yiming. Both members of the Lu clan were both a little apprehensive, because Shi Yongming's present state was too baffling. If this had nothing to do with Ling Han, that would be too much of a coincidence, but if it was really Ling Han's doing, that would be even more terrifying. He did not even need to raise his hand, and one would have already been hit. Then how were they supposed to guard against him? Lowly commoner, you are too arrogant, Lu Yiming said, putting on a fierce appearance but was actually cowardly. Ling Han cracked a smile. I almost forgot. You still owe me a bet. Hearing him mention this again, Lu Yiming's face instantly flushed red. He glanced at Lu Kaiji, and the latter nodded at him. The two of them immediately joined forces to attack. Ling Han shook his head. They thought they could resist him just by joining forces? They were really too naive. He activated the Primal Chaos Celestial Core, and instantly the battle prowess of these two people dropped drastically by 3 heavens. This base power was inferior to Ling Han, so how could it match him? Ling Han charged out, and as he brandished his fists, Lu Kaiji and Lu Yiming were instantly beaten into disarray. The gap in battle prowess was really too wide. They were not on the same level at all right? No matter what Lu Kaiji and Lu Yiming did, it was completely useless. Very soon they were suppressed by Ling Han. Come, fulfill your bet first, then we'll settle the other debts. Ling Han pressed Lu Yiming and Lu Kaiji onto their knees. Why do I have to kneel as well? Lu Kaiji asked defiantly. Air. Ling Han pondered for a moment, before saying, it was just a passing thought. However, since one is already kneeling, the other might as well. Mighat as well your sister. Don't be so casual. Lu Kaiji was both furious and embarrassed. Kneeling down in public was naturally a complete loss of face. He had completely lost all his face, so how would he be able to face others in future? However, what could he do? He was no match for Ling Han's strength at all, and was firmly pressed onto the ground. Ling Han smiled. It's fine even if you guys don't slap yourselves. In any case, I'm not in a hurry, so you guys can just continue to kneel like this. Fuck. Lu Kaiji glanced at Lu Yiming, and Lu Yiming also glanced at him. The two of them decided to admit defeat for the moment. The longer they knelt, the deeper the humiliation they would suffer. They had best end this nightmare as soon as possible. Lu Kaiji and Lu Yiming both slapped themselves. Though this was also very humiliating, it was still better than continuing to kneel. At the same time, the dazed Shi Yongming suddenly moved, brandishing the demon subduing staff in his hands and attacking everywhere. Not caring at all, causing the people in the surroundings to be greatly shocked and hurriedly move out of the way. A core formation tier cultivator that wielded a spirit body. Who dared to block him? Was this guy crazy? Shi Yongming seemed to have encountered a life-or-death enemy, and brandished the demon subduing staff in his hands. Every strike was delivered with his full strength, and his expression would be twisted at times, proud at others, nervous at others. It was truly colorful. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. The black light of illusion was truly astonishing. Though its level was inferior to destructive energy or primal chaos divine lightning, heavenly Tao flames, but its practical use was not the slightest bit inferior. Ling Han did not feel regret at having branded it on the celestial core and turning it into his true celestial technique. Others didn't know that Shi Yongming had fallen into an illusion and only thought that he had gone mad. They all retreated. If they were wounded or even killed by a maniac, then there would really be no place for them to seek justice. However, after Shi Yongming brandished it for a while, the demon subduing staff slowly dimmed, its might decreasing time and time again. At this time, Shi Yongming's expression suddenly changed, and he regained consciousness. He was a disciple of the Buddhist race, after all, and he cultivated the art of the soul, so it was easier for him to break free from an illusion than any other person. However, it was naturally too late now. The energy of the demon subduing staff had almost been exhausted. No! He cried out in frustration. This demon subduing staff was planted in his body by an arhat from the Buddha race of the West Heavenly Realm. He nurtured it, and when he advanced into the spirit transformation tier, he would possess a deadly weapon. But now that he had used it in advance, not only did it not have the effect of subduing the enemy, it had instead exhausted all its energy. This meant that all the effort he had previously put in was completely wasted. Damn it! Damn it! Ling Han, if I don't expiate you, I swear that I won't live, he said through gritted teeth. Ling Han merely smiled. For someone like me, how could hell dare to take me in? Sure, Yongming, it would be better for you to go to hell to exorcise the departed souls and follow in the footsteps of Buddha Doga. He charged out. At this moment, Sure Yongming's spirit body was already exhausted. So what did he have to fear? Boom! Sure Yongming parried, but he had previously fallen into an illusion and used all his powerful moves. How could he possibly be a match for Ling Han at this moment? In just 2 or 3 moves, he had completely fallen into a disadvantage and was suppressed extremely terribly by Ling Han. This was still the result of Ling Han not using the primal chaos celestial core. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to withstand a single strike. Even so, it was only a few dozen moves, and he was already in a perilous situation. His vital points were repeatedly hit, and he was throwing up blood endlessly. Ling Han, you dare to kill me? Sure Yongming didn't dare to believe this. He was West Heavenly Realm's Buddha son, and his status was extremely high. Wouldn't he be afraid that the Buddha race would be angered and exterminate your entire clan? So what if I kill you? Ling Han was cold, and his attacks were extraordinarily heavy, showing no mercy at all. This caused everyone to inhale sharply. They could not believe this at all. Ling Han was far too arrogant, wasn't he? He actually dared to kill a member of an imperial clan. At first, Lu Yiming and Lu Kaiji were extremely furious, but now their hatred towards Ling Han actually decreased slightly. Just look, he even dared to kill the Buddha son. In comparison, just having the two of them kneel on the ground and slap themselves 3 times was nothing? Please consider carefully. Qi Menghan suddenly spoke up, sending a message through divine sense to Ling Han. Ling Han knew that Qi Menghan was deliberately reminding him to prevent him from being too arrogant or being blinded by hatred and making drastic actions. However, this wasn't his drastic actions, but rather his actions after careful consideration. Pang! With a single punch, Sure Yongming was already killed. Under the barrage of destructive energy, Sure Yongming didn't even have the chance to burn his celestial core to extend his life. There was dead silence. A Buddha son had died. This was equivalent to an imperial son. It was equivalent to having poked a hole in the heavens. Next, the Buddhist race would definitely fly into a thunderous rage. Yet Ling Han was unconcerned. The true Buddhist race was located in the 33 heavens. Though there were branches in the north, south, east, and west heavenly realms, and they all had Buddha sons, they could only be considered pseudo-Buddha sons. Because compared with an imperial daughter like Qi Menghan, Sure Yongming's strength was not just a little bit weaker. Thus, the Buddha sons of the 4 heavenly realms were all pseudo-Buddha sons. The real Buddha sons would definitely be in the 33 heavens. Of course, killing Sure Yongming would definitely anger the Buddhist race, but it should only be the Buddhist race of the West Heavenly Realm. At most, this can only be considered the equivalent of a holy land. What did he have to fear? Everyone looked at Ling Han and felt rueful. Incredible, this was really incredible. If this freak from the North Heavenly Realm could continue to live, he would definitely become a saint in the future. Furthermore, he would be an incredibly powerful saint, the kind that dared to oppose even an imperial clan. However, as the saying went, the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the winds. Putting aside the Buddhist race, the Battle God Palace had already issued a killing order against him. Would this brat be able to live until the day he became a saint? Shwa! Right at this moment, a flash of sword light suddenly appeared out of thin air, slashing towards Ling Han's back. The strike was both fast and accurate. Pooh! The sword slashed down, splitting Ling Han into 2. Ha ha ha! The person who had launched the sneak attack revealed his true form. It was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man, but at this moment, he was exuding a burning brilliance. He was the true self-tier assassin from the Battle God Palace. Previously, he had been searching for the blood-patterned Dao Stone, and had only arrived here not too long ago. However, he had coincidentally discovered Ling Han. He had succeeded with a single strike. He laughed loudly. He had finally killed the target that the Battle God Palace had to kill. He had done a great service this time, and when he returned, he would definitely be rewarded. However, in reality, Ling Han just happened to be standing 9 meters away, completely unscathed. This assassin had already fallen into an illusion. He wanted to show off the strange shadow steps in front of Ling Han? What a joke. He had long since grasped the complete strange shadow steps, and also had an eye technique. If anyone wanted to approach him soundlessly and sneak attack him, that was practically deceiving himself. However, Ling Han simply took advantage of this fact and secretly used the black light of illusion, causing the other party to unknowingly fall into the illusion that he had woven. Seeing this assassin smile foolishly, everyone gritted their teeth. This was a true self-tier cultivator, and he had actually concealed his cultivation level and snuck in secretly. How disgraceful! Judging by the way he sneak attacked, he seems to be an assassin from the Battle God Palace. It should be. Ling Han is on the must-kill list of the Battle God Palace. But what's wrong with him? He's smiling so brightly. Could it be that he thinks that he has successfully killed Ling Han? It's like he's gone mad. Don't you think this is very similar to Shi Yongming's situation just now? At this point, everyone stopped in unison. Then, they turned to look at Ling Han, their faces filled with shock. This guy, could it be that he could make one enter into an illusion at any time? Heavens, just how many mystical powers had this guy grasped? Ah! The assassin suddenly came back to his senses. After all, he was a true self-tier cultivator, so the illusion couldn't confuse him for too long. I'm going to kill you. He glared furiously at Ling Han, his face burning. He was laughing like an idiot in public. This was too embarrassing. The true self-tier assassin roared loudly and charged towards Ling Han again. Then, he stabbed and slashed again and again, strike after strike. Black light blazed, and killing intent spread out, his divine might incredibly powerful. But as everyone watched, they all felt a sense of amusement and terror rise up in their hearts. That was because that assassin was randomly attacking again, and was completely slashing at empty air. Right, he had once again fallen into an illusion. After a while, the assassin came back to his senses. He faltered for a moment, and his whole face was as red as blood. Ling Han, I'm going to tear you into pieces. He charged over again, and then very tragically, continued to slash at the air. Ling Han, cutting at empty air. Ling Han, cutting at empty air. A considerable number of people couldn't help but laugh. This scene was indeed quite hilarious, but top-notch prodigies such as Qi Menghan and the others didn't smile at all. They only felt a deep wariness towards Ling Han's strength. That was a true self-tier assassin, and he was actually being toyed around with by Ling Han. This was practically a freak. However, what they didn't know was that Ling Han also felt very regretful. Being trapped in an illusion didn't mean that he had lost consciousness. When he was attacked, he would still instinctively counterattack. Thus, even if Ling Han attacked, it would only be a waste of energy. The higher one's cultivation level, the more difficult it would be to win with a disadvantage in cultivation level. Even a disadvantage of a minor level was extremely difficult, let alone a disadvantage of a major tier. However, those who could advance into the true self-tier definitely had very high natural talent in martial arts, so the assassin's resistance to illusions was also getting stronger and stronger. At the beginning, the illusion was enough to trap him for about half a minute, but now 1 or 2 seconds was already the limit. Ling Han, you're definitely going to die today, the assassin said balefully. He already knew how to deal with the illusion. Couldn't be helped. After all, there was a gap of a major tier between their cultivation levels. It was already quite impressive that Ling Han was able to affect him, and if their cultivation levels were equal, Ling Han could even use an illusion to trap his opponent until he died of old age. Ling Han cracked a smile. I'm afraid you won't be able to. You, a mere core formation tier cultivator, and I have already broken through your illusion technique, so how are you going to stop me? That assassin walked towards Ling Han, step by step. The tip of his sword was lowered, and killing intent surged out, drawing an obvious mark on the ground. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You're dreaming. Haha, die." The assassin pounced over. He became one with his sword, and he was like a fleeting swan. However, a large hand suddenly swatted over. Pung, that assassin was pressed into the ground. Then, that large hand turned into drifting energy that returned to the heaven and earth, and the assassin had already been smashed into mush of blood. Hiss! Which elite had made a move? Wang, everyone felt a frightening pressure assault them, and saw that those saints that had disappeared, Venerate Tears and Sect Masters had all returned. The 9 Mountains Venerate also appeared beside Ling Han. He was the one who had struck Battle God Palace's assassin to death. What a joke. He had already considered Ling Han as his personal disciple, and had placed his hopes on him becoming an emperor. How could he allow others to assassinate him? Senior, did you gain anything? Ling Han asked. The 9 Mountains Venerate nodded and smiled. I've gained quite a lot. Ling Han retrieved a spatial tool and handed it over, saying, "This is a small token from this disciple." The 9 Mountains Venerate couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. This disciple of his actually gave him something. It had only ever been an elder giving something to a junior. Now that it was him, why was it the other way around? However, he didn't mind this. After receiving the spatial spirit tool, he swept his divine sense over it and was astonished. This was a Tao stone, and one that had been refined by a great emperor at that. This time he was excited. At his cultivation level, it was already extremely difficult to take another step forward. Previously, he had observed the regulations of heaven and earth in the Blood Palace, which gave him a feeling of appreciation. If he could strike while the iron was hot, and comprehend with the Tao stone of a great emperor, the possibility of taking another step forward would be extremely high. However, after only a single thought, the 9 Mountains Venerate returned the spatial spirit tool to Ling Han and said, "You have boundless future prospects. These Tao stones will be left for you to use when you attempt to break through to the saint path in future." In comparison, he valued Ling Han's future more. Ling Han smiled and pushed the spatial spirit tool back towards him. "Senior, you need more than I do. Furthermore, if you take another step further, or even become a saint in fact, then wouldn't my backer be even more reliable?" The 9 Mountains Venerate faltered upon seeing Ling Han's serious expression. He couldn't help but laugh loudly and put away the spirit tool. "All right, I'll be your backer in the future." He naturally liked Ling Han even more. Ling Han, on the other hand, did not feel the slightest heartache. He was filled with confidence in himself, and believed that he would be able to comprehend the regulations of heaven and earth without depending on this kind of external object. Furthermore, comprehending the Tao stones refined by a great emperor would definitely affect him. For those who were determined to break through to the imperial path, this was actually disadvantageous. Part of the reason why the imperial clans could not produce a second great emperor was because they were too deeply influenced by their own clan's great emperor, so how could they possibly walk their own path? On the other side, Liu Cage and Liu Yiming were also making complaints, but when the Shattering Stars Saint heard this, he only warned the two of them. As members of the imperial clan, this was indeed an incredibly glorious matter, but if they only used their power to bully others, that would be embarrassing the imperial clan. It had to be admitted that those that could become saints did indeed have a great bearing. Of course, it was also possible that saints could not bring themselves to bully a mere core formation tier cultivator. At the very least, Shattering Stars Saint hadn't attacked Ling Han yet. All the juniors related the current situation, and this caused the 3 saints to feel curious. They were very proud. What place in this world could imprison them? It should be known that they still had an imperial weapon on them. Thus, the 3 saints each grabbed their own juniors, and with a flash, they had already begun to cross the ocean. They were saints. How awesome! Senior, would you like to try as well? Ling Han asked. The 9 mountains venerate shook his head. He kept staring at the surface of the sea, and after a while he said, "There are astonishing regulations in this seawater and on the surface of the sea, and they are intertwined. I can resist them, but it won't last long, and this will corrode my flesh and blood completely." In other words, even if a venerate tier crossed the sea bravely, it was very likely that he would die midway. This was the power of a great emperor. Even though he had been dead for heaven knows how many years, even venerate tier elites had to respect him. Then what could they do? Just go back like this? Come, let's go take a look at that pile of bones. The 9 mountains venerate suddenly said. Previously, Ling Han had mentioned this to him. All right. Ling Han naturally would not object. The two of them soon arrived at the pile of skulls. The 9 mountains venerate swept an eye over it, then turned to Ling Han and said, "Are you brave?" "Quite so, I should think." "That's good." The 9 mountains venerate moved and began to dismantle this pile of skulls. Then he turned these skulls into a raft. "No way, you want to use this to cross the sea?" The 9 mountains venerate seemed to have seen through his confusion and said, "According to my deductions, the bones should be immune to the corrosion of regulations, so it wouldn't hurt to give it a try." It wasn't just the 9 mountains venerate, but also other venerable tier elites who were harvesting skulls to build rafts. Being able to become a venerate tier elite, they indeed had amazing insight. The 9 mountains venerate brought the bone raft to the coast and said with a smile, "Come on, senior, take it easy." Ling Han gritted his teeth. This looked a little unreliable. "Haha, as long as I'm still breathing, I guarantee that not a single hair on your head would be hurt," the 9 mountains venerate said with a smile. He grabbed Ling Han and threw a palm strike. A terrifying power surged, immediately pushing the bone raft into the depths of the sea. The bone raft rode the winds and waves, its speed astonishingly fast. However, the sea wasn't calm and without waves, especially when the bone raft was advancing at high speed, creating waves that crashed over. However, these waves were all neutralized by the 9 mountains venerate. After walking for a while, the 9 mountains venerate stopped steering the ship. Because he was continuously dispersing the impact of the waves, he was also slightly strained. Though he still had a lot of energy left, who knew what other dangers lay here? It was naturally impossible that he would use up all his power. After resting for a while, they saw another bone raft row over from behind them. There were a total of 3 people on this raft. One was a venerate tier elite while the other 2 were young men. 9 mountains, you are really outrageously bold. You actually dare to enter into the West Heavenly Realm, that venerate tier said. There was no anger or joy on his face, and it was unknown what kind of attitude he had. The 9 mountains venerate smiled faintly and said, "What is it? Is the West Heavenly Realm the underworld or hell? Can't I come? When we get out, let's fight," the venerate tier elite said. "All right." The 9 mountains venerate was completely unafraid. "Now, should we join forces?" the venerate tier elite suddenly said with a smile. The 9 mountains venerate raised a brow and said, "Deal." The 2 venerate tier elites both needed to rest. They were too strong and could extract the energy of heaven and earth at any time. There was absolutely no need for them to wait until the sun rose. "Brother Ling, let's get to know each other. I am Ning Yanghao, and this is my clansman, Ning Bian." A young man clasped his hands in Ling Han's direction, his expression very modest. Ling Han also clasped his hands in greeting. "Greetings, Brother Ning." However, Ning Bian was much more arrogant. He merely raised a brow, then said, "I've heard others speak of you in such a grand manner, but you're only in the late stage of the core formation tier. I really don't know why those rumors are so exaggerated." It was clear that he had not seen the scene of Ling Han defeating Shi Yongming, Lu Kaiji, and Lu Yiming on the beach. Otherwise, no matter how high his opinion of himself was, he would not dare to say such flippant words. Ling Han merely smiled. There was nothing to be concerned about this kind of young brat. Of course, he was also unwilling to destroy the alliance that had just been formed between 2 venerate tier elites. Otherwise, no matter what, He would have to teach this brat who had an exaggerated opinion of his own abilities a lesson. Brother Ling, please don't be angered. This clan brother of mine rarely goes out, so he is a little rash. Ning Yanghao played mediator. Brother Hao. Ning Bian was still defiant. It's fine. He's just a child. Ling Han waved his hand casually. This infuriated Ning Bian, and also made Ning Yanghao grit his teeth. You still say it's all right? You didn't show any mercy with your words either. Ling Han suddenly shuddered and looked into the distance. Using his eye technique, he saw something floating. Ning Yanghao and Ning Bian also looked over, but they didn't have eye techniques, so they naturally couldn't see anything. Ning Bian humphed. Stop pretending. Ning Yanghao was also slightly surprised. He believed that Ling Han was not that kind of person, but he had indeed not seen anything. What was going on? After a while, he also let out a surprised exclamation, and suddenly stood up. Brother Hao, what's wrong? Ning Bian asked, after being rebuked by Ling Han, and thought that he had been tricked, so at this moment he was extremely displeased. See for yourself, Ning Yanghao said darkly. Ning Bian looked in the direction he was pointing, and couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. That was a corpse. He couldn't help but feel shocked. There was a terrifying power of regulations in the seawater, and even venerate tier elites would be corroded. Otherwise, why would they have used bones to make rafts? But now, there was a corpse that was moving with the waves, its physical body uncorroded. How could this not be terrifying? Xiao, the 9 mountains venerate, and the heavenly venerable tier both stood up, their expressions stern. To be able to keep his physical body from decaying, there must be endless regulations interwoven within his body. The 9 mountains venerate said. The heavenly martial venerate nodded. Regulations intertwine with the physical body. This is saint. The 2 venerate tier elites exclaimed at the same time. Hearing the word saint, Ling Han and the other juniors all felt their hearts skip a beat. Throughout history, there would always be lapses in ancestral kings. For example, in the current era, saints were the strongest in the world, and even imperial clans would treat them as esteemed guests. But now, the corpse of a saint had been thrown into the sea, so how could they not be shocked? When an emperor descends into the world, even saints are like ants. 9 mountains venerate exclaimed. The heavenly martial venerate was also in a complicated state of mind, filled with a feeling of loneliness and dejection. Both of them had set becoming saints as their lifelong goal. Thus, seeing a saint's corpse thrown into the sea naturally caused endless feelings to rise up in their hearts. So what if he was as strong as a saint? In front of a great emperor, he was nothing but trash. Right at this moment, a terrifying aura assaulted him. It was like a supreme god tool, piercing the skin painfully. Ning Yanghao and Ning Bian immediately couldn't bear it, and blood oozed from their skin, presenting a horrible sight. Not good, saintly might. The 2 venerate tier elites hurriedly steered the rafts to dodge, retreating into the distance. Only then did that terrifying aura disappear. Ning Bian glanced at Ling Han, and could not help but feel dissatisfied, because both he and Ning Yanghao were covered with blood, and looked extremely disheveled. However, Ling Han was completely unscathed. Merely with this comparison, it was clear who was superior among them. And it should be known that the 2 of them were both at the consummate level of the core formation tier, which was a minor level higher than Ling Han. 9 mountains, your 9 sons' holy land has really picked up a treasure. The heavenly martial venerate looked at Ling Han with undisguised envy. Ha ha! The 9 mountains venerate laughed loudly, his expression incredibly smug. He might not be able to become a saint in this lifetime, but Ling Han would definitely be able to. In fact, there was still hope for him to become an emperor. Becoming an emperor, just the thought of it made him incredibly excited. That was the ultimate elite of the universe, capable of suppressing an era, leaving behind an eternal name that would be praised for eternity. Why has the saint's corpse floated over again? The 9 mountains venerate suddenly frowned. They had steered the rafts away, and did not move with the waves. Instead, they headed in a sideways direction. Thus, if that saint's corpse was drifting with the waves, They should have been separated. Strange. The heavenly marshal venerate nodded, his expression slightly serious. Let's go. The 9 mountains venerate continued to steer the raft. After all, it was a saint's corpse. If it really turned into a zombie or something, it would definitely be incredibly terrifying, so it was best to stay as far away from it as possible. The heavenly marshal venerate nodded, and hurriedly steered the bone raft as well, floating alongside the 9 mountains venerate. Ling Han turned around, only to see that the saint's corpse was rapidly disappearing into the distance. It wasn't long before it disappeared from his sight. The 5 of them soon forgot about this matter. After traveling for another half a day, they stopped to rest. Ling Han was bored and looked around. All of a sudden, his expression changed, and he blurted out, "Not good. That saint's corpse has floated over again." In the distance, a corpse floated over at an unhurried pace. Wasn't this the saint's corpse that he had previously seen? He was dressed in robes, completely purple-red in color, and wore a purple-gold crown on his head. These were obviously all treasures, and there was not the slightest sign of decay. However, this saint's corpse wasn't floating very fast, and it was far from being able to compare to the speed at which the 2 venerate tier elites were rowing the rafts. Yet, it had actually caught up to them after only a moment. This was naturally terrifying. Strange. The heavenly marshal venerate opened his eyes and looked towards the 9 mountains venerate. There was a questioning look in his eyes. "We have to recover power, or we might encounter even greater danger." The 9 mountains venerate muttered to himself. The heavenly marshal venerate nodded in understanding. If they expended too much of their power, then in such a strange sea of blood, they could possibly encounter even more danger. The saint's corpse floated closer and closer, and that terrifying aura came again. Ling Han and the others hurriedly steered the rafts as well. Their power was insufficient, so the speed of the bone raft was naturally not too fast either. Thankfully, the saint's corpse was not moving very fast either, and just followed behind them at a leisurely pace. Though they had not been caught up, the expressions of the 3 young men were a little ugly. Being pursued by a corpse, just the thought of it was enough to make one's scalp go numb. What in the world was going on? There's an island ahead. Ling Han's eyes were sharp, and he looked into the distance. "Row over," the 9 mountains venerate immediately said. "All right." Ling Han steered the bone raft and headed towards that island. The Ning brothers naturally moved as well, steering the bone raft to follow. Behind them, that saint's corpse was also chasing closely, as if it had eyes of its own, completely ignoring the movement of the ocean currents. In a short while, the island in front of them appeared. It was not very big, and its greatest length was only 2.5 kilometers. But for the 5 of them, having a firm foothold and a place to rest was already enough. They docked and landed on the island. The 2 venerate tier elites moved one after another, and grabbed the bone rafts from the sea. If they were washed away by the seawater or destroyed by the saint's corpse, it was really possible that they would not be able to return. This small island was very desolate. It was just a field of rocks, but there was a pool in the center of the island. There's a great herb," the 9 mountains venerate and the heavenly marshal venerate said at the same time. They arrived at the side of the pool, and saw that there was presently a blood-colored lotus flower growing in the pool. Additionally, the lotus flower had long since borne seeds, forming a blood-colored lotus pod, covered with light silver veined patterns. "Ha ha!" The 9 mountains venerate immediately laughed loudly. "Brat, your luck is not too bad. These lotus seeds contain regulations, and its grade is definitely not low. This is just in time to add a new veined pattern to your celestial core." "Wait!" The heavenly marshal venerate hurriedly stretched out a hand. "9 mountains, have you forgotten that I still exist? What is it? You want to compete with a junior for this kind of treasured medicine?" 9 mountains venerate's expression was filled with disdain. The heavenly marshal venerate humphed. "I don't need it. But don't I have any juniors? These 2 people are already at the consummate level of the core formation tier. Don't tell me what they inscribed previously on their celestial cores corresponds to the regulations of the blood lotus. Eating these lotus seeds can help them complete the regulations. The 9 mountains venerate mocked. How did you guess? The heavenly martial venerate pretended to be surprised. Fuck. You are really too shameless, aren't you? The 9 mountains venerate thought for a moment and said, if we fight, we'll need at least a few days to decide the victor. Moreover, this place is extremely strange, and unpredictable dangers might appear at any time. Therefore, why don't we let these 3 juniors fight over it? When the heavenly martial venerate heard this, he hesitated slightly. Ling Han was only at the late stage of the core formation tier, while Ning Yanghao and Ning Bian were at the consummate level of the core formation tier. There was a gap of a minor level between them, and this was an irreversible gap for top-notch prodigies. Thus, no matter how one looked at it, Ling Han had no chance of winning. However, since there was no chance of victory, why had the 9 mountains venerate brought it up? He was no idiot. Okay. Ning Bian interrupted. He stared at Ling Han. Young people were hot-tempered, and he was really too defiant. What right did Ling Han have to make such a great name for himself? Though he had already witnessed how extraordinary Ling Han was previously. When it came to background, the Ning clan had descended from a saint. They were both members of the Holy Land, and the style of a clan was completely different from the style of a sect. Since childhood, he had been ingested with various natural treasures, and had cultivated a top-grade cultivation technique. How could this be compared to a person who had no solid foundation? Moreover, he also had an advantage in terms of cultivation level. All right, the heavenly martial venerate nodded. Indeed, he couldn't think of any reason to lose, so he agreed. For the sake of fairness, all celestial tools are forbidden from being used. Fair your head. The 9 mountains venerate didn't expose that. He had too much confidence in Ling Han. Ling Han smiled, stepped out and said, Brothers Ning, the 2 of you can attack together. How arrogant. Ning Bian was infuriated. Pointing at Ling Han, he said, I'll immediately let you know the consequences of being arrogant. He pounced and delivered a palm strike at Ling Han. Shwa, golden light blazed, turning into a sharp sword. Ling Han replied with a punch. Pong! This golden sword was instantly shattered, and the power of the punch did not decrease, continuing to blast towards Ning Bian. What? Ning Bian was astonished. In his eyes, Ling Han was only at the late stage of the core formation tier. His power could only reach 20 heavens at most. Yet upon contact, he discovered that Ling Han's power was actually as high as 28 heavens. This was too terrifying. It should be known that his power was only 22 heavens. Even if he channeled the saint technique, his battle prowess would only increase another 2 heavens, far from being Ling Han's match. Pong! He was sent flying by Ling Han's punch. Thankfully, Ling Han withdrew his power when he hit him. Otherwise, with this blow, Ning Bian would be finished. Of course, the heavenly martial venerate was just standing at the sidelines. So how could he possibly watch helplessly as his junior was killed? He would definitely move to stop him, so Ling Han simply withdrew the power of his own accord. Ning Bian's face alternated between red and white. At this moment, no matter how stubborn he was, he had to admit that there was a gap between him and Ling Han, and it was not small either. 9 mountains. I'm really jealous this time. The heavenly martial venerate looked at Ling Han. Previously, though he had a high opinion of this young man, he now discovered that this young man's freakishness far exceeded his imagination. The 9 mountains venerate smiled as he stroked his beard. At this moment, he only needed to smile reservedly. A thought flashed through the heavenly martial venerate's mind, and he said to Ling Han smilingly, Young man, have you married? What kind of imagination was this? His imagination was running too fast, wasn't it? Ling Han nodded. I already have a wife. The heavenly martial venerate couldn't help but sigh. Such an outstanding young man, it would be great if he could take him as a son-in-law of the Ning clan. Unfortunately, Ling Han was already married, and the Ning clan was a noble holy land, so how could they possibly allow their noble daughter to serve the same husband as another woman? The 9 mountains venerate moved and plucked the lotus seed pod. As for the lotus, the heavenly martial venerate had plucked it. Although it hadn't ripened yet, it would still have some effect. It was better than wasting it. They searched around the island again, but did not find anything else. Just as they were about to leave, they saw the saint's corpse float over from the sea again. It was as if it were guarding them. "Let's go." The 9 mountains venerate said solemnly. The 2 venerate tier elites tossed out their bone rafts, then set out, quickly leaving this small island. After traveling far away, the saint's corpse floated over unhurriedly again. It was really like a lingering ghost. They all ignored him. At least until now, this saint's corpse had only been following them, and had not harmed them. Even the 2 venerate tier elites needed to rest, but with their strength, who knew how far they could travel in a single day. However, this great sea was terrifyingly huge. They traveled for a whole 3 days, yet still had not managed to cross this great sea. However, the weather on the seas suddenly changed. Multiple arcs of blood-red lightning flashed, and their might caused even the expressions of the 2 venerate tier elites to change. That was because this had reached Saint Tier, and even Saint Tier elites would have to go all out. Otherwise, it was possible that they would die. Thankfully, the blood-colored lightning was far away in the distance, and did not strike over. A rain of blood began to fall from the skies. This did not have any corrosive effects, but had a very strong negative effect on the mentality, and gave rise to endless despondent thoughts. Ling Han was still fine. The quality of the primal chaos celestial core was too high, allowing him to suppress such negative emotions. However, Ning Yanghao and Ning Bian couldn't hold on any longer. They were in a daze, and almost threw themselves into the sea to commit suicide. Thankfully, the heavenly martial venerate was there, and the 2 of them were directly knocked unconscious. Seeing that Ling Han was still calm and composed, the heavenly martial venerate's love for talent grew even stronger. Too bad. Why had Ling Han already married? Otherwise, with such a good son-in-law, it was a sure bet that a saint would emerge from the Ning clan in future. After walking for another day, not only was there a shower of blood, but a strong wind was also blowing on the sea. This was no ordinary wind. It could be seen that there were seals of regulations flickering in the air. If one was scraped by this kind of wind, it was guaranteed that he would be torn into pieces. The 2 venerate tier elites didn't dare to be careless. They placed the 2 bone rafts so that they were side by side. One venerate tier elite focused on steering the rafts, while the other raised a shield to resist the terrifying winds of regulation. This was like a great battle. The opponent was equivalent to sect master level. Originally, he should not have been able to withstand a single blow, but there was no end to it. This was even more powerful. With several hundred, tens of thousands, or even tens of thousands of sect masters battling in turns, even venerate tier elites would have to be careful. At this kind of time, Ling Han wasn't even qualified to interfere, and could only watch from the sidelines. However, since he had nothing to do, he took out the lotus seed pod, peeled out a lotus seed and began to eat. Others would definitely be filled with shock and fear at this moment. Even if it was a top-grade prodigy, he was facing a great enemy, so how could he still have the mood to refine the great herb and extract the regulations? However, Ling Han was no ordinary person. The more he was in such a situation, the calmer and more composed he was. The heavenly martial venerate saw this, and felt even more regretful. He secretly decided that in future, he would have Ning Haoyang and Ning Bian become closer to Ling Han. He would not be able to get a live-in son-in-law, but at least they could get a friend. According to 9 Mountains Venerate, this lotus seed contained the secrets of regulations, and was the most suitable for Ling Han to consume now. He could extract the heaven and earth's regulations from it, and transform it into veined patterns for the celestial core. After eating the lotus seeds, the taste could not be considered delicious. Ling Han spoke from the perspective of a professional glutton. Not long after, a mysterious power rose up in his mind, turning into pieces of seals. This was regulations, but Ling Han couldn't understand them, and could only think of them as complicated seals. He extracted these shards and attempted to combine them. Only by forming a complete seal would he be able to analyze a useful seal, and that was the regulations of heaven and earth, which could be inscribed on the celestial core. Of course, he had to confirm the level of this regulations first. If it was too weak, he didn't want it. The celestial core was only so big, so how could it allow a piece of trash-level regulations to waste its space? Quang. A clap of thunder rang out, waking Ling Han from his comprehension. In the skies, blood-colored lightning flashed unhindered in the distance, and the wind and rain became heavier in an instant. This gave the two venerate tiers immense pressure, and they both became extremely alert, not daring to be the slightest bit careless. 9 mountains, the heavenly marshal venerate suddenly called out, his voice trembling slightly. What kind of world had a venerate tier not seen? His voice was actually trembling? The 9 mountains venerate was originally focused on resisting the wind and rain, and when he heard this, he turned to look sideways. He couldn't help but reveal an astounded expression, and saw that there was a blood-colored massive wave rolling over from the distance, and this massive wave was actually as tall as 3,000 meters. He swept an eye over it, and shook his head. This massive wave was extraordinarily huge, and there was no boundary to either side of it. There was no way to circle around it at all. "We have to take it head-on," he said. The speed of this massive wave was too fast. With their present speed, they would be caught up. Thus, they had to face this massive wave head-on. The heavenly marshal venerate nodded. He took out a jade cauldron and floated it above his head. Then it rapidly enlarged, just enough to completely shield the bone rafts. Multiple streaks of light descended. This was manifested from regulations, and could be considered the strongest guardian in this world. This was the spirit tool that he had cultivated with his life. Now that it was a matter of life and death, Ling Han naturally had no intention of hiding his strength. He prepared to take out the Primal Chaos Extreme Lightning Tower and hand it over to the 9 Mountains Venerate. Though this was not a real imperial weapon, the Origin Gold itself possessed great might. When used in the hands of a Venerate tier elite, its might should be stronger than an ordinary Saint tool. However, the 9 Mountains Venerate had already summoned the Saint tool, the 9 Suns Parasol. After endless power was poured into it, this precious tool quickly revived. A saintly might spread out, but it didn't target the people on the bone rafts. Not far away, the blood-colored wave was already approaching. It could be seen that the wave was densely covered with seals. In fact, it had even turned into multiple divine chains. "Get ready!" the 9 Mountains Venerate roared. The 9 Suns Parasol unleashed its full might, blasting towards that massive wave. Pong! The Saint Tool unleashed its might, shooting out a pillar of light. After this attack, a hole was blasted into the massive wave, which was about 30 meters in diameter. "Pass through." "All right." The heavenly marshal Venerate steered the bone rafts and rushed through the bloody hole. The waves crashed rapidly, their speed astonishingly fast. Thankfully, it was a Venerate tier that was steering the raft. Whether it was in terms of power or ability to adapt, he was top-notch in the world, and managed to pass through the bloody hole without any mishaps. The strange thing was that it was calm on this side. There was no wind or rain in the sky at all. If it was not for the fact that they could still see that massive wave rapidly leaving when they turned around, who would believe all that was happening in front of their eyes? However, they had finally left the danger zone. The 2 Venerate tier elites and Ling Han all breathed a sigh of relief. The situation just now was truly dangerous. Even the Venerate tier elites were on edge. The heavenly marshal Venerate woke Ning Yanghao and Ning Bian up. There was no more blood rain by now, so there was no need for them to continue lying down. What's that in front of us?" the heavenly marshal Venerate asked. The 9 Mountains Venerate looked over, and he couldn't see clearly either. The 2 Venerate tier elites couldn't even see clearly, let alone Ling Han, who couldn't see anything even after activating his eye technique. Hiss! All of a sudden, the 2 Venerate tier elites inhaled sharply. Fuck! What the hell was going on? Ling Han's heart was filled with curiosity. Something that could cause the expressions of 2 Venerate tier elites to change drastically. What great matter had happened? Ning Yanghao and Ning Bian had not experienced the massive waves previously, so the 2 of them were at a loss and confused. "Should we go and take a look?" the 9 Mountains Venerate asked the heavenly marshal Venerate. "All right." The heavenly marshal Venerate pondered for a moment before nodding. The two venerate tier elites steered the bone rafts forward. Ling Han calmed down slightly. Since the two venerate tier elites had actively charged over, it meant that the situation wasn't serious. At the very least, it wasn't as dangerous as being attacked by massive waves. After walking for a while, Ling Han suddenly discovered that the originally calm seawater had begun to flow. And looking around, the strange thing was that all the seawater was surging in one direction. This was a little inconceivable. Unless a large hole had appeared in the sea, it was possible that all the seawater would be drawn in that direction. A hole had appeared in the ocean. This was really too funny. Ling Han was just mocking himself when his expression froze. If that was not the case, how could the expressions of the two venerate tier elites change drastically? No way, a hole would appear in the sea of blood? After walking for a while longer, the surging of the seawater became faster and faster. After walking for a while longer, loud splashing sounds could already be heard. Ling Han activated his eye technique and looked forward. A look of astonishment instantly spread across his face. Ahead of them, a massive hole had really appeared in the sea, forming a circular waterfall. Boundless seawater crashed down, creating a colossal noise. Heavens! Look! The heavenly martial venerate pointed ahead. The 9 mountains venerate immediately looked over, and Ling Han also looked over. With the channeling of his eye technique, his eyesight far surpassed the eyes of ordinary core formation tiers. They saw that there were actually multiple corpses in the seawater that had rushed into that massive hole. They were whole corpses, and had not been corroded into bones. It should be known that only a saint would be able to maintain the integrity of his physical body in this kind of seawater, whether he was alive or dead. In other words, these were the corpses of saints. This was terrifying. Just how many saints were there? Saints died. These are the deaths of saints. The 9 mountains venerate muttered. He had really been shocked. The heavenly martial venerate wasn't much better off. Only these venerate tier elites knew that the saint tier definitely wasn't superior to the venerate tier by a whole level of cultivation. This kind of literal strength was actually an earth-shattering change. In front of a saint, even venerate tiers were like ants. Theoretically speaking, there should only be a pitifully small number of saints in the universe. In fact, even a galaxy could barely produce a single saint. Thus, how many saints could there be in the universe? Alright, even if every imperial clan had 2 saints, taking into account the saints of the other forces, there would only be over 100 of them in total. At most, it would not exceed 200. But in this place, every minute or so, there would be a few saint corpses that had been washed into the hole. Just how terrifying was this number? Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others were completely ignorant. They only knew that saints were powerful, and there were very few of them. However, they were completely unclear about how powerful they were, and how rare they were. Thus, though they were also stunned for a moment, they were not as shaken as the 2 venerate tier elites. Behind them, the saint's corpse also floated over. Drawn by the water flow, it directly floated towards the hole ahead of them, sliding down and disappearing without a trace. Now that there was no saint's corpse following behind them, they should have breathed a sigh of relief. But in this strange place, the 5 of them felt even more anxious. Let's go, the 9 mountains venerate said. There was nothing much to see here. Although the saint corpses descended one after another, and the scene was filled with impact, it would naturally become boring after watching for a long time. The heavenly martial venerate nodded. The 2 great venerate tier elites controlled the bone rafts to go against the flow. With their power as venerate tier elites, they were naturally capable of resisting this kind of oceanic current. Very soon, the hole in the ocean was far away from them. The 5 of them did not speak. Seeing so many saint corpses all of a sudden, they were still in a state of shock, and it was very difficult for them to immediately come back to their senses. Ling Han also thought of the Black Heaven Temple. That was also because saints had died all over the place, but compared with the number of saints here, it was like an amateur watching an expert. Was there no record of such saints dying in history? Ling Han thought back to what Qi Menghan had said. There would always be gaps in history from time to time. Even the truth of events tens of millions of years ago might not be deduced. True, the great emperor only had a lifespan of 10 million years, So what was so strange about some things being annihilated in history? The two bone rafts rode the winds and waves, and another few days passed. That annoying wave rose again, causing the two venerate tier elites to once again be on tenterhooks. Thankfully, that massive wave that was 3,000 meters tall did not appear. Most importantly, they had lost their way now. There was no difference between day and night here. The sky would always be blood red, so it was extremely difficult to determine their location. Originally, the venerate tier elites should have a very good sense of direction. Even if there was no reference material, it was fine. However, the environment here was unique, and it was extremely easy to affect one's mind. Even the venerate tier elites were no exception. At least, in terms of direction, they were already dumbfounded. Just like that, they floated on the sea for many days. The 5 of them were already a little numb, and did not know when such days would end. Ling Han was still fine. He had already finished eating all the blood lotus seeds, and there were innumerable shards in his mind. He was reconstructing them every day, so there was not much time left for him. That was because if he did not combine them into seals and brand them on the celestial core, they would dissipate not too long after. Thus, he would sit cross-legged on the bone raft every day and concentrate on cultivating. This caused the heavenly martial venerate to nod repeatedly as he watched. Being able to calmly cultivate under such conditions, how could Ling Han not be freakish? Ling Han's body trembled slightly. By now, he had finally completely comprehended the heaven and earth regulations contained within the blood lotus, turning it into an incredibly complicated seal. With a slight tremor, it seemed capable of shattering the heavens. A murderous aura circulated, causing his eyes to instantly become bloodshot. In fact, even his hair was vaguely showing a hint of red. So terrifying. Ling Han was very pleased. The level of regulations should not be inferior to heavenly Tao flames and the primal chaos divine lightning. Could be branded. He inscribed this seal on the celestial core, and discovered that this was another incomplete blood-colored seal. It was clearly not very big, but it occupied a very large space. This was natural, aside from the complete primal chaos divine lightning that he had coincidentally obtained. With his current cultivation level, how could he possibly grasp the complete top-tier regulations? However, the heavenly Tao flames, developed to the pinnacle, could even soften origin gold. It could be claimed to be the strongest flame in the world, and it would not be an exaggeration to call it the imperial flame. Then, going by the same logic, the primal chaos divine lightning and the blood-colored seal were all great emperor level. However, the destructive energy was actually a level higher, judging from the size of the area it had reserved. This was terrifying. Was there anything in this world that was stronger than Emperor tier? Or could it be that there were actually differences in strength among great emperors as well? It was just that there was no comparison, so it was impossible to determine who was stronger. Mainland. We can finally see mainland. It was at this moment that the two venerate tier elites exclaimed in excitement. A piece of mainland finally appeared ahead of them. Including the two venerate tier elites, the 5 of them were all very excited. They had either returned to their starting point in a daze, or had already crossed the Great Sea. No matter what, it was better than being trapped on the Great Sea. No! The 9 mountains venerate suddenly said, "This isn't mainland, but a large island." What? Ning Yanghao and Ning Bian were both stunned. No way. The 2 of them couldn't see the edge of this island even with their full vision. What kind of island was this? It was ridiculously huge, wasn't it? Ling Han activated his eye technique and looked into the distance at the coastline. Only then did he catch sight of the edge of the land. Indeed, this was an island and not a mainland, but it was incredibly huge. No matter what, we've finally arrived at a new place. Let's look around. Who knows? There might be a great secret here. Heavenly Martial Venerate said. The remaining 4 nodded. It was unknown which ancestral king had built this, but since it involved an ancestral king, there must be a great secret. The 5 of them landed on the shore and stowed away the bone rafts. They still needed to use it when they returned, and then began searching on this colossal island. This island was the same color as the sea. It was blood-red in color, and there was blood-colored mist wafting in the air, which greatly affected vision. The two Venerate tier elites showed vigilant expressions at the same time. They stopped in their tracks, as if they were facing a great enemy. Mist filled the air, and nothing could be seen. After waiting for a while, the two Venerate tier elites advanced in unison, but their footsteps were extremely slow. In an instant, Ling Han immediately felt a powerful aura assault him, causing all the hairs on his body to stand on end. There was a supreme elite ahead of them. No wonder the two Venerate tier elites looked on guard. The fog here was dense, and it greatly affected vision and divine sense. Who would dare to mess around? It should be known that they had seen who knew how many saint corpses in the last few days, so how could even a Venerate tier dare to be careless? Who would want a lifetime of hard cultivation to result in nothing? A figure gradually appeared ahead of them. Primary constant. 9 mountains. Heavenly Marshal. The 9 mountains Venerate and the Heavenly Marshal Venerate called out at the same time, and a voice came from ahead of them. Both sides felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from their shoulders. As it turned out, it wasn't an enemy, but rather another Venerate tier that had entered this space at the same time they did. Who? Ling Han and the other juniors also relaxed. Both sides walked towards each other. There was only one Venerate tier elite on the other side, while he had brought 3 juniors with him. When they saw Ling Han, the 3 juniors all looked disgusted. The West Heavenly Realm had always looked down on the North Heavenly Realm, and they couldn't possibly change their perceptions just because of Ling Han. On the other hand, the more powerful Ling Han's performance was, the more he suppressed the West Heavenly Realm so much that they couldn't even raise their heads. This made them detest him even more. 9 mountains, why aren't you staying at the 9 suns' holy land? Why have you come here? Primary constant Venerate asked, a hint of provocation in his voice. What can you do about it? The 9 mountains Venerate said proudly. 9 mountains, you still dare to be so arrogant after coming all the way to the West Heavenly Realm? Primary constant Venerate raised a brow. The competition and competitiveness among heavenly realms was not just limited to the juniors. What is it? Do you want to fight? The 9 mountains Venerate wasn't afraid at all. When we get out of here, I really want to ask you for some guidance, Primary constant Venerate said calmly. Then you'll have to queue up. The 9 mountains Venerate laughed loudly as he pointed at Heavenly Marshal Venerate. The Heavenly Marshal Venerate laughed loudly, playing mediator. All right. Now everyone should work together and explore the island together. Primary constant Venerate nodded. On his way here, he had also seen a great many corpses of saints, and was naturally filled with wariness of this place. Even saints would die here, so it was no different for Venerate tiers like them. The 3 venerable tier elites teamed up and started to search the large island. However, the fog here affected even Venerate tier elites, so they couldn't see clearly how far ahead they were. Thus, their progress wasn't fast. After 2 days, they didn't discover anything, but the team expanded considerably, because they encountered several Venerate tier elites along the way, bringing their juniors to join the team. Thankfully, the blood mist only obstructed vision and divine sense, and did not have the ability to confuse others. Thus, everyone did not lose their way. Though the efficiency was not high, they were still steadily searching through the various areas on the island. The island's environment had also changed. Previously, it was a flat mountainous area, but gradually, sharp stone pillars protruded. They were incredibly long, as if they were about to pierce through the heavens. At first, everyone was unconcerned, but as they walked, they discovered that there were actually traces of blood on a pillar, but it had long since dried up. A Venerate tier elite soared into the sky, and when he landed, there was already a corpse in his hand. Hiss! This is a Venerate tier elite. After the Venerate tier elites examined him, they all paled in shock. A mighty Venerate tier elite was actually stabbed to death on a stone pillar? They were also Venerate tiers. If the culprit was still here, would they be spared? He's already been dead for who knows how many years, the 9 mountains Venerate said. The divine essence has all been lost. Otherwise, we should feel pressure when we pass by this place. Everyone nodded. Could it be that it was also the doing of that ancestral king? Someone asked. This caused all the Venerate tier elites to fall silent. Those who could become a great emperor were not only extraordinarily talented, but also broad-minded. This had been developed through being tested by the heaven and earth. Looking at history, which great emperor hadn't suppressed an era, allowing a supreme prosperity to appear in martial arts? But in this place, there were innumerable saint corpses, and there were also Venerate tiers that were slaughtered like animals, hanging on stone pillars. These methods were really too cruel. No matter how they looked at it, it did not seem like the actions of a great emperor. The problem was, if it wasn't a great emperor, who would be able to kill so many saints? Could it be that it was a pseudo-emperor? A Venerate tier said with a frown. That's not very likely. His conjecture was immediately denied. Any pseudo-emperor would take that final leap, but once he failed, he would definitely die. Thus, if it is claimed that a pseudo-emperor could live for so many years and kill so many saints, that doesn't make sense. Indeed, there were really too many saint corpses here. They did not seem like they belonged to the same generation at all. No matter what, they had to traverse millions of years, and aside from an ancestral king, who else could live for so long? Everyone was scratching their heads in confusion. They couldn't figure it out no matter what. We can't be careless. Let's continue forward. The 9 Mountains Venerate said in a solemn voice. If this had been set up by an ancestral king, then even if that ancestral king had died, the methods that he left behind would be able to easily venerate tiers, and it was probable that even saints would not be spared. For example, the heavenly Tao flames could completely accumulate for millions of years. Once they gushed out, even saints would be turned into ashes. They continued onwards. They had not walked too far when they encountered people again. This time it was a saint. The Donglin Imperial clan's crystal saint. Qi Menghan and Qi Dao were naturally present as well. Qi Menghan was reserved, while Qi Dao came over very warmly to greet Ling Han, causing the other young people to be dumbfounded. What was going on here? Was Ling Han planning to leap over the Dragon's Gate and become the son-in-law of an imperial clan? The appearance of a saint in the team naturally calmed everyone's hearts. At present, there were no emperors in the world, and the Crystal Saint also had the imperial weapon. Thus, no matter what kind of danger they encountered, the Crystal Saint could resolve it. Speaking of which, the Crystal Saint really unlucky. Though his speed was faster, he had completely lost his sense of direction in the sea of blood. In truth, he had just arrived here, but saints were saints after all, so he was still faster than the others. Furthermore, he was the first to arrive among the 3 saints, which showed that saints were actually not very useful here. The deeper they went into the island, the thicker the fog became. Another day later, they really couldn't even see their own fingers. The Crystal Saint summoned his imperial weapon. The mysterious ice banner danced above his head, easily tearing a hole into the blood mist. The area within 3,000 meters became clear again. The imperial weapon was the imperial weapon, after all. It hadn't awakened yet it was already so mighty. If it fully awakened, would it be able to raise the sea of blood to the ground? Seeing the might of the imperial weapon, everyone's courage increased greatly. Even if an ancestral king came back to life, the imperial weapon should be able to last a few moves, right? In Ling Han's mind, the primal chaos extreme lightning tower trembled slightly. It was doing it again. This guy seemed to have been provoked, and was determined to jump out and fight. The Crystal Saint looked slightly surprised, because he could feel the imperial weapon become restless, as if it had been provoked. It was actually showing signs of awakening on its own. However, the problem was that there weren't any other imperial weapon here. Could it be that the ancestral king that had set up this place had also left behind the imperial weapon, and it was presently on this island? That was why the imperial weapon had sensed it, and that was why it wanted to actively awaken and battle it. Which ancestral king hadn't swept through the world and ruled over an era? Thus, the ancestral king's ambition was higher than the heavens, and the imperial weapon that they had forged was naturally unafraid of any challenge. Be careful. It's extremely likely that there's an imperial weapon standing guard here, the old saint said. Hearing his words, everyone paled in shock. If the imperial weapons engaged in a fierce battle, even saints would have no option but to turn around and flee. In fact, if they were the slightest bit slower, their only fate would be death. At this moment, even the venerate tears almost wanted to retreat. It was too dangerous. Only Ling Han knew the truth, and he couldn't help but wear a strange expression. If everyone knew that he was the cause of this saint looking like he was facing a great enemy, or rather, it was the primal chaos extreme lightning tower in his mind, would he be beaten to death by these venerate tears that had flown into a rage out of humiliation? Yes, it was really possible. Hence, he definitely could not say. Ling Han was also slightly proud of himself. This was something that could induce fear in the hearts of a group of venerate tears. He, a core formation tier, should be the one and only to achieve this in history. Everyone was extremely careful. It was extremely possible that there was another imperial weapon here. Once it unleashed its might, even saints would be killed. It was extremely dangerous, and they had to be extremely careful. The mysterious ice banner fluttered lightly, and the blood mist in front of them was easily dispersed, giving everyone a clear view. All around them, stone pillars soared into the sky one after another, and what was terrifying was that there was actually a corpse pierced by every stone pillar. However, the bloodstains of the majority of the corpses had only flowed to 1/3 of the length of the stone pillars, and were gone. Hence, at this moment, though the air of their blood spread out, they could not be discovered. These corpses were all venerate tier corpses. The sea was filled with the corpses of saints, while this place was filled with the corpses of venerate tier elites. They were all hanging on stone pillars like livestock. Was this a sacrificial ceremony for worship? There was also the pile of skulls from before, and there was no shortage of venerate tiers and saints among them. Otherwise, it could not have possibly formed such a terrifying pressure. Just what kind of world was this? Let's go. Continue walking. Led by the saint, they continued onwards, penetrating deep into this island, and the further ahead they went, the steeper the terrain became. On the 5th day, a mountain peak appeared ahead of them. Let's go. Now that they were here, there was naturally no reason for them to retreat. They all ascended the mountain. However, though the environment here was terrifying, with saint corpses and venerate tier corpses appearing at the drop of a hat, there was actually no danger at all. On the other side of the great ocean, there were still souls, but here, there weren't even any ghosts. The mountain was very tall, but there was a saint here, so what was the height of the mountain worth? In less than half a day, they had already arrived at the summit. Yeah. After reaching the summit, quite a number of people immediately exclaimed in shock. That was because there was a blood-colored great tree at the summit, but it did not have even half a leaf. Its thick trunk was actually semi-transparent like jade. What caused everyone to exclaim in shock was how innumerable branches hung down, supporting a woman. This woman was wearing a blood-colored long dress, and her hair was also blood-red. As the mountain winds blew, it fluttered slightly, like flames. Her eyes were tightly closed, as if she was sleeping, but even so, her beauty was still world-shaking. Even Ling Han had to admit that this woman's beauty was already not inferior to the Empress and Hunyou. And near the blood tree, there were also blood-colored giant eggs, as tall as a man. They were no longer semi-transparent, but every single one of them was squirming slightly, as if life was nurtured within. This scene was too bizarre. That red-haired woman was breathtakingly beautiful, but those giant blood-colored eggs were disgusting. The two images intertwined, incompatible, yet inseparable. Is she dead? Someone murmured, starry-eyed. How could such a beautiful woman possibly die? Immediately, someone rebuked, his face similarly filled with adoration. To say nothing of these youngsters, even a few venerate tears looked captivated. This woman was really too dazzlingly beautiful, causing their hearts that were completely focused on cultivation to waver. Immediately, someone wanted to rush up and rescue the red beauty. Wait! There were always calm people, especially those venerate tears who had cultivated for so many years. Even if their minds were affected, they could still control themselves very well. I can sense that this blood tree is extracting the energy from the ground, supplying it to that woman, a venerate tear said. That's right, and I have a bold conjecture. Previously, those venerate tears that had been stabbed to death on the stone pillars had all had their energy essence extracted and transformed by this blood tree in some way, to be supplied to her, another venerate tear said. When everyone heard this, some immediately looked shocked, while others shook their heads. Impossible. How could such an exceptionally beautiful, untainted woman possibly do such a cruel thing? These people refused to believe it. It is indeed impossible that this woman was the culprit, the crystal saint said. To be able to kill so many saints, it must be the handiwork of a great emperor. However, this place has existed for who knows how many years, and there has never been a great emperor that could live for so long. Furthermore, if this woman was really a great emperor, and we were so close, we would have long since been shocked to death by the imperial might. This was indeed very useful evidence. Furthermore, if this woman was really a great emperor, then no one should have any extravagant hopes with regards to her. But all this is too strange, someone said. Indeed, there was a sea of corpses of saints, pillars stabbing the corpses of venerate tears, and this exquisite red-haired woman was currently in slumber. It was completely impossible to connect all of this. If she hasn't died, we can wake her up. Who knows, we might be able to know the whole story, a venerate tear suggested. This won the agreement of the majority. Whether they were interested in the red-haired beauty, or were more curious about this world, they all needed to awaken this woman first. I'll go. A junior immediately jumped out. He was already completely captivated by the red-haired beauty. The saint did not speak, and all the venerate tears also tacitly agreed. This young man then walked towards the blood tree. However, the elites were all prepared to move. This place was too strange, and things definitely could not go so smoothly. At first, the young man was walking very slowly, but his footsteps soon became faster and faster. Then, he became faster and faster, and it became a run. There was also excitement on his face. With such an exquisite beauty, if he could get close to her, he was even willing to live a few hundred years less. However, just as he was about to reach her, shwa, a branch suddenly moved and whipped towards him, extremely fast. Humph! How dare you! A venerate tear moved. Pa! A majestic light flashed, interwoven with regulations, turning into a divine sword. With a slash, the branch was severed. He was the elder of that young man, so he naturally could not just sit by and watch. The young man was given a fright, but when he saw that the branch had been severed, he showed an expression of pride. With the support of his senior, what did he have to fear? Beauty! I'm here! The infatuation in his eyes deepened, and he couldn't wait to pull that red-haired beauty into his arms and love her tenderly. Involuntarily, he sped up and then lost consciousness. And in the eyes of the masses, as this young man ran, he suddenly broke into pieces, as if there was an invisible supreme divine blade that had instantly sliced him into several pieces. Then, they turned into a mist of blood and disappeared completely. This Xianxia, the venerate tear cultivator who had attacked earlier, couldn't help but call out. Not only was this his clansman, but this was also his direct descendant. He had placed great hopes on him, yet in the end he had died in front of him, without even leaving a piece of himself behind. If the large black dog was here, he would definitely grumble. What is it? You want him to leave a piece of himself behind for you to eat? He roared loudly and pounced forwards. The precious tool of the venerate tear had already been drawn. It was a long green saber, and was fully activated at the first instant. The terrifying might of the venerate tear surged out, causing even heaven and earth to pale. The crystal saint frowned slightly. He had not seen clearly how that young man had died, but he still stretched out a hand, dispersing the pressure that surged over from that venerate tear. Destroy! That venerate tear was furious, and struck out with his saber, intending to destroy that blood tree along with the red-haired beauty. No! This caused a great many young people to exclaim in shock. Even a considerable number of venerate tears were slightly out of control. Should they make a move to stop him? Whether the blood tree was struck or not, they were completely unconcerned, but it was a different story for that red-haired beauty. She was really breathtakingly beautiful, and even they were moved. The blood tree immediately launched a counterattack. One after another, its branches waved, lashing out at that venerate tier. There were actually regulations moving as well, and their might was powerful. This was very inconceivable. Though there were innumerable celestial medicines in the world, celestial medicines were only very nutritious. They themselves did not have any battle prowess. At most, they would only release some poisonous chi, or create illusions to confuse others. And those that could directly make a move would definitely have developed intelligence, and gained spiritual consciousness. Once they gained spiritual consciousness, even wood-aligned creatures couldn't possess a long lifespan. They would also be limited by their cultivation level. However, although it was unclear how many years this place had existed for, it was definitely astonishingly long. Thus, why was this blood tree still alive? Boom! The blood tree battled fiercely with the venerate tier. It was extremely powerful, and was not the slightest bit inferior to the venerate tier. Humph! A mere demonic tree dares to commit violence. Another venerate tier moved, charging towards the blood tree. As a dignified venerate tier, time was very precious, so how could he possibly have so much free time to just observe the battle for a long time? The two venerate tiers teamed up, and the situation was naturally different. They immediately suppressed the blood tree, and victory was only a matter of time. However, there were also venerate tiers who felt that they were too slow and joined the battle as well. 3 against 1, this formed a qualitative change, and the blood tree could not hold up at all. More importantly, it was rooted here, and couldn't run around randomly. Naturally, it was a huge disadvantage, losing even faster. But right at this moment, a terrifying scene appeared. The 3 venerate tiers suddenly shattered into pieces, and then turned into a mist of blood, not leaving behind the slightest trace. Fuck! 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 This time, everyone's hair stood on end. Those were 3 venerate tiers, supreme elites that were only inferior to saints, and they had actually died so soundlessly, without the slightest bit of preparation, without the slightest bit of resistance. How could this not be frightening? Was it the action of a saint? Or was it an ancestral king? If there really was an ancestral king here, then all of them added together would be killed with a single palm strike. Even the awakening of the imperial weapon would be useless. Great emperors were invincible in the world, and those that could stand against a great emperor were definitely not the imperial weapon, but only another great emperor. The crystal saint walked out. With a wave of his hands, multiple streaks of regulations of heaven and earth were instantly extracted, turning into threads of silk. Even though each thread was as thin as a spider's web, if one was cut by this silk, it was guaranteed that even venerate tiers would be instantly split into half. Instantly, someone understood, and exclaimed in shock. They were all killed by the threads of regulations. This would explain why the young man from before, as well as the 3 venerate tiers, had been silently torn into pieces. However, was there another saint here? Everyone turned to look at the red-haired beauty, and then shook their heads in unison. Putting aside the fact that she was a saint, even if she was either dead now or in an extremely sealed state. How could she possibly make a move? This was a strange place, and it was far too strange. Even venerate tiers could die so soundlessly, and they were like crops being harvested. This caused a boundless chill to rise up in everyone's hearts. Obviously, this blood tree, or rather this red-haired beauty, was a taboo that could not be touched. The crystal saint humphed upon hearing this. He was a member of the imperial clan, and in this era where there were no emperors, what did he have to fear? He strode forward, with the imperial weapon hovering above his head. It was in a state of awakening at any moment. He strode forward, and could clearly see that the regulations of heaven and earth had solidified, forming a complicated 3-dimensional network. The imperial weapon was even more terrifying. With a light wave, it directly tore a rip into the void, and a terrifying energy surged out. That was high-level energy. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head. As it turned out, high-level energy did not exist in this time and space, but rather in the void. However, this high-level energy was not all that powerful. At most, it was equivalent to the energy corresponding to the first spirit diagram that he had learnt. However, the Imperial weapon didn't need to channel its power at all. It could easily pierce through the void and draw out high-level energy. This was naturally terrifying. "You guys, look!" someone suddenly exclaimed, pointing into the distance, even his voice trembling. In the distance, a blood-colored wall was presently approaching. No, that was not a wall, but a wave. The sea suddenly roared, creating a wave that was as tall as 3,000 meters, that was presently crashing towards this massive island. This was hard for everyone to believe. The sudden arrival of the massive wave had nothing to do with what they were doing now. Just how terrifying were these waves? It was filled with corrosive power, and even venerate tears would be melted to the point that only their bones would remain. Only saints would be unafraid. The crystal saint couldn't help but stop in his tracks. He was unafraid of these waves, but what lay behind these waves made him extremely wary, because this was the power of a great emperor. Furthermore, it was suspected that there was another imperial weapon here, so he dared not be careless even more. This one had been tricked quite seriously. Of course, he was not afraid either, because he firmly believed that there was no emperor in this present world. Heavens! A venerate tear suddenly exclaimed, and stretched out a finger to point at that massive wave. They saw that it was not something as simple as a wave, and there were actually multiple figures appearing in the waves. The saint corpses. Pong! The massive wave had already crashed onto this colossal island, shaking the ground madly. Then, that wave began to recede, turning into countless waves, but a terrifying scene was presently happening. One after another, the corpses of saints flew over, and then, they opened their eyes. Dead people opening their eyes? Everyone was numb with shock. Those who had already died had opened their eyes again. This was already frightening enough, and these dead people were saints at that. That was even more terrifying. Wong, wong, wong! Boundless aura surged, enshrouding over. The saint corpses didn't simply open their eyes. Instead, it was as if they had come to life. They radiated with the unique might of saints. Heavens, several thousand saints had appeared at the same time. What kind of concept was that? The corpses of these saints were all exuding a piercing killing intent. Though they had opened their eyes, they were all expressionless. They had long since died. These saints came from all kinds of races. There were pure humans, tiger tribe, wolf tribe, and snake tribe. All of them exuded a powerful aura that could suppress heaven and earth. One of them was capable of shattering planets. When there were a few thousand of them, just their aura alone was enough to tear apart the heavens. The crystal saint immediately activated his imperial weapon. Although he was a saint and the most powerful being in the world, he would definitely be obliterated if he were to face several thousand of the most powerful beings. The imperial weapon awakened, and instantly, an indescribable aura circulated, as if an emperor had descended. Instantly, everyone knelt down. No one was an exception aside from Ling Han. However, those few thousand saint corpses were completely unafraid, and charged towards him like moths flying into a flame. Pong, pong, pong! Even someone as powerful as a saint was useless. The imperial weapon shook slightly, and the saint corpses that had crashed into it was forcefully shattered into pieces. Great Emperor, the strongest in the world, and there weren't any prerequisites. Everyone raised their heads, only to see the corpses of saints explode one after another like firecrackers. However, not a single drop of blood splattered. It was as if they were dried corpses. This was a one-sided slaughter. However, the problem was that another massive wave crashed over from the distance, and another few thousand saint corpses appeared. The expression of the crystal saint changed drastically. Although the imperial weapon was invincible, the problem was that he wasn't a great emperor, so he couldn't activate it endlessly. At most, it would only take a few minutes and he would be exhausted. By then, what would he do? Thousands of saint corpses crashed into him, and even he could only die. Retreat! 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 He roared loudly. With a wave of his large hand, he had grabbed everyone. Then, the imperial weapon cleared the path, turning rapidly, heading back the way it had come. Xiao, a saint's speed was extremely fast, and with the imperial weapon leading the way, what else could block it? The crystal saint forcibly carved out a path, but he was also as anxious as a stray dog. Ling Han looked at the island, and it instantly became a black dot. However, through the eye technique, he could still see the red-haired beauty. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he saw that the woman's eyelids actually twitched. But when he was about to confirm whether it was the red-haired beauty or the giant island, they had all disappeared from his field of vision. The only thing that could be seen was the colossal wave that was chasing after them, determined to smash them into pieces. However, a saint's speed was far too quick. In just a few hours, they could already see the coastline. The crystal saint didn't stop. Instead, he continued to advance until he arrived before the entrance. Only then did he descend and loosen his grip. Everyone regained their mobility. The saint was really too strong. There were so many venerate tears in his grasp, and not one of them actually managed to break free. Of course, at that time, no one really wanted to break free. There's a terrifying background here. If we want to investigate this place, we'll probably have to work together with the other imperial clans and have them bring the imperial weapons over, the crystal saint said. Everyone nodded. Though there were no great emperors in the world now, and as long as he drew out the imperial weapon, it would be enough to sweep aside all opposition. The power of a saint was inferior to the ancestral king by who knew how much. There was a limited amount of time that he could keep the imperial weapon activated, so how could he possibly withstand the barrage of attacks from tens of thousands of saint corpses? Thus, the only way to investigate this place was to gather more members of the imperial clans and send out a large number of saints along with the imperial weapons. Then, no matter how many thousands or tens of thousands of saint corpses you had, they would all be razed to the ground. Let's go our separate ways. The crystal saint directly tore a rip into space, and left with Qi Menghan and Qi Dao. The area from before was a separate space, and even if they tore it open, they would not be able to leave. Now that the saint had left, it was naturally even more impossible for them to enter and take risks. They all tore a rip into space and left. The 9 Mountains Venerate stayed behind. He had promised to spar with Severe Venerate Tears, and with his status and identity, he naturally wouldn't go back on his word. Thus, after staying here for close to 10 days, the 9 Mountains Venerate finally brought Ling Han back to the 9 Suns Holy Land with him. Even so, this was still much faster than Ling Han returning by himself. After receiving the news, the Empress, Hunyo, the large black dog, and the others all came out to receive him. This parting had taken about a year's time. Thankfully, they had all come out of the Genesis world, and would often go into seclusion for tens of millions of years. In comparison, a year's time was only enough for them to take a nap. The 9 Mountains Venerate started to cultivate in seclusion as soon as he returned. He had gained a lot from the Blood Palace, and he had even obtained the blood pattern Dao stones later. This had been refined by a great emperor, so it was extremely beneficial to him. Perhaps, after the 9 Mountains Venerate came out of seclusion, he would become a saint. Ling Han thought optimistically that his backer would be strong enough. The large black dog had already broken through to the core formation tier. Because he had fused 9 cauldrons into a single celestial cauldron, the first step of the core formation tier was extremely easy for him to complete. However, the Empress and Hunyo were still in cauldron forging tier, and needed to stabilize their cultivation level before they could break through. Ling Han divided the soul nurturing stone among them, and told the 2 women and dog to each take a portion. This could be used immediately after they broke through to the middle stage of the core formation tier. He began to pass on what he had learnt. The 9 styles of the God of War, the strange shadow steps were all extremely powerful and practical ultimate techniques. However, this peaceful life didn't last long. On this day, the members of an imperial clan suddenly arrived. The Heaven Wolf Imperial Clan. Ling Han suddenly received a notification. He ran out to take a look, and saw that the atmosphere was extremely tense. Ling Han. A cold voice rang out, bearing deep resentment. Ling Han looked over. This was a woman, and she was quite beautiful. However, her pretty face was currently twisted with fury. Di Hailon, the Heaven Wolf Imperial Clan, the only clan with the surname of Di. They had finally come looking for him. Ling Han acted as if he had not seen anything, and merely paid his respects to the 9 Mountains Venerate. Wasn't this venerable tier in seclusion? Yet now, even he had been alerted, which showed that the situation this time was slightly serious. The Nine Mountains Venerate raised his hand, indicating that there was no need for excessive courtesy. My request is very simple. Hand Ling Han over and I'll immediately take him away, an elder said. He was tall and sturdy, and he radiated with an incredibly powerful aura. The Nine Mountains Venerate smiled coldly and said, "When did the Nine Suns' holy land fall to the point of having someone come to our doors and demanding one of our own?" The elder was the Venerate tier elite of the Heavenly Wolf Imperial clan. His title was Eastern Sea. He raised his white brows and said, "Nine Mountains, do you want to become enemies with the Imperial clan? You still can't represent the Imperial clan." The Nine Mountains Venerate scoffed. Although the Eastern Sea Venerate and Dihailan belonged to the Imperial clan, they weren't part of the main branch. Rather, they had long since been separated from the main branch. However, this was the bloodline of a great emperor after all. This bloodline had also produced saints before, and had left behind a renowned reputation. Of course, because the saint had already passed away, this branch of Imperial clan only had Venerate tier elites keeping watch. In terms of abilities, they were completely inferior to the Nine Suns' Holy Land. "Very well, you even dare to look down on the Imperial clan," the Eastern Sea Venerate said balefully. "Do you really think that just because my branch has left the main branch, it no longer belongs to the Imperial clan?" The Nine Mountains Venerate waved his hand dismissively and said, "Cut the crap and get to the point." "Holy fuck." The Eastern Sea Venerate faltered for a moment. This Nine Mountains Venerate was truly domineering. However, this was also in line with the tradition of the Nine Suns' Holy Land. This force was famous for shielding its own people. Ling Han killed the son-in-law of our D clan. No matter what, he has to give an explanation, right? He said balefully. The Nine Mountains Venerable tier elite, Nine Mountains Venerate, waved his hand and said, "Ancient sites are searching for treasures, so it's unavoidable that there would be fights. Isn't it very normal for there to be casualties and injuries? If someone were to be wounded or killed, his family would have to seek justice, so would everyone still need to cultivate their cultivation techniques? If they seek justice every day, they would have to give an explanation." The Eastern Sea Venerate humphed. He seemed to have foreseen that the Nine Mountains Venerate would say this. Thus, he wasn't angered and he said, "Fine, I won't pick on the weak either. Let the two of them fight again. Wasn't this person already dead? How was he supposed to fight? Fight with a ghost?" Not only was Ling Han stunned for a moment, but even the Nine Mountains Venerable tier elite was slightly surprised. He turned to look at the Eastern Sea Venerable. The Venerate of the Eastern Sea smiled proudly. "How could the means of our Imperial clan be something that you can imagine?" He paused, raised his voice, and called out, "Heaven Step, fourth great-grandfather." A young man walked out from behind Dihailan. Previously, he had kept his head lowered, so that no one could see his face. Now that he had walked out, he immediately strode forwards with his head held high, exuding an aggressive aura. Hong Tianfan, Hong Tianbu. It was actually Hong Tianfan Tianbu. He really hadn't died. Ling Han found this strange. In the Black Heaven Temple's Heaven Temple, he had indeed cut Hong Tianjing in half. Why wasn't this guy dead yet? That's right. No wonder he hadn't seen Dihailan come to seek revenge. He should have immediately brought Hong Tianbu back to the Imperial clan with him, and only then did the manage to save him. TSK, TSK, TSK. He had survived a great calamity, and this guy was really blessed with good fortune. He had actually advanced into the true self tier. However, although he hadn't died after being cut in half, his foundations had definitely been severely damaged. Even if he was treated by a supreme godly medicine, it would still be very difficult for him to recover to his prime condition in a short period of time. Yet, he had actually broken through. This kind of true self-tier elite definitely wouldn't be very strong. Thinking about it, it made sense. If Hong Tianfan wanted to take revenge with his own hands, he could only do so in terms of cultivation level. Otherwise, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, even the Imperial Sun had been defeated by Ling Han. No matter how arrogant he was, he wouldn't dare to compare to the Imperial Sun. right? Thus, he was the first to advance into the true self tier, intending to use his cultivation level to suppress Ling Han. Ling Han, you didn't expect this, did you? I didn't die, Hong Tianju said balefully, his killing intent cold. His situation wasn't as bad as Ling Han thought, because he also had the eye of a primordial beast, fused into his body. It was also because of this thing that Hong Tianbu hadn't died instantly even though he had been cut in half. Instead, he had held on until he returned to the Imperial clan. And also because of this primordial vicious eye, his battle prowess was still considerably stronger than the usual early stage of the true self tier. Ling Han shrugged nonchalantly. It's all right. I'll just kill you again. Fuck. Hong Tianbu didn't know how to respond at this moment. You're far too fucking arrogant. Haha. A mere core formation tier cultivator dares to boast shamelessly. He finally spoke. Not convinced? I'll kill until you're convinced. Ling Han smiled faintly. On the other side, the Nine Mountains Venerable Tier Elite, the Nine Mountains Venerate, frowned and said to the Eastern Sea Venerate, there is a gap of a major tier between the Nine Mountains Venerable Tier and the Nine Mountains Venerate. Is this interesting? They're about the same age, and their cultivation levels were also the same when we first met. Now that Heaven Tier is in the lead, how could it be that he can be blamed for having higher natural talent? The Venerate of the Eastern Sea retorted coldly. All right. Unexpectedly, the Nine Mountains Venerate Tier Elite, the Nine Mountains Venerate nodded decisively. Just let the two juniors deal with it themselves. Neither you nor I are allowed to interfere. Whoever interferes will be the grandson. The Eastern Sea Venerate was startled. He had not thought that the Nine Mountains Venerate tier would agree so readily, but he was immediately angered. What grandson? You are a Venerate tier, after all, so can't you have some manners when you speak? He was slightly confused, but when he thought about it, it was very possible that the Nine Mountains Venerate Tier Elite, the Nine Mountains Venerate, had agreed to this solution because he didn't want to embarrass the Holy Land and didn't want to offend the Imperial clan. True, no matter how strong the Holy Land was, how could they dare to offend the Imperial clan? Then, the two of you can begin. The Eastern Sea Venerate waved a hand dismissively. As he saw it, Ling Han was already a corpse. Regardless of how talented Ling Han was, he didn't care at all. Those who dared to offend the Imperial clan were naturally seeking death. Meanwhile, Hong Tianbu clasped his hands behind his back and slowly walked toward Ling Han. This time, he was truly brimming with confidence. The true self tier against the core formation tier, this was an absolute one-sided domination. No matter how prodigious and beautiful you were, there was no way you could compensate for such a gap in cultivation level. Ling Han, everything is finally about to end, he said calmly. Ling Han cracked a smile and nodded. It certainly should end now. From the Dark North Nation until now, everything has come to an end. I'm impressed that you can still smile, Hong Tianbu said. It takes one to know one. Hong Tianbu's smile suddenly disappeared, and boundless killing intent exploded from his eyes. If Ling Han didn't exist in this world, his life wouldn't have been like this. Instead, he would have been able to obtain even more opportunities. In his eyes, all of Ling Han's achievements should have belonged to him. It was Ling Han who had snatched away the opportunities that should have belonged to him, and the glory that belonged to him. From today onwards, there will no longer be a person like Ling Han in this world, he said softly, but his voice was incredibly firm. The true self tier against the core formation tier, this should be an absolute one-sided domination. Thus, even the people of the Nine Suns Holy Land didn't have a high opinion of Ling Han at all. They thought that he would definitely die in this battle. Aside from the Nine Mountains Venerate, the Empress, and a few others, they naturally knew that Ling Han was also a formations grandmaster and could draw on the power of the ley lines to support himself. At the very least, he would be able to protect himself. Otherwise, with the Nine Mountains Venerate's high opinion and love for Ling Han, would he deliberately screw Ling Han over? Of course, Lu Qi smiled in satisfaction. He had been anticipating this day for a long time. It was a shame that he couldn't kill Ling Han himself. This made him feel slightly regretful. Meanwhile, Song Lan looked nervous, her slender hands involuntarily clenching into fists. Seeing this beauty ranked 9th in the galaxy so concerned about a man, many people instantly looked jealous. Prosperous Heaven's expression was slightly strange. She already knew that Ling Han had killed Shi Yongming, so she was naturally more optimistic about Ling Han's talent. However, the key was that Ling Han was too good at causing trouble, causing her to begin to hesitate. Would this bring great trouble to the Buddhist race of the North Heavenly Realm? Hong Tianbu strode forwards. He didn't need to soar into the skies. The Nine Suns' holy land was continuously strengthened by generations of elites. If this place wasn't able to withstand even true self-tier level battle prowess, then others would really be laughing their heads off. Farewell, he said calmly, and finally made his move. Wang, he sent out a palm strike lightly, but endless power of heaven and earth surged out, turning into a giant hand that was like white jade. Multiple veined patterns could be seen glowing. That was the profound will of heaven and earth. This was the strength of the true self-tier. He could stimulate the regulations of heaven and earth, and the power of the attacks he delivered would form a qualitative change, crushing all core formation tiers. Ling Han naturally wouldn't face this attack head-on. He activated the imminent skyline and quickly dodged. He then unleashed a murderous aura attack at Hong Tianbu. Humph! A crack appeared on Hong Tianbu's forehead, and he similarly exuded a terrifying murderous aura, blocking the murderous aura. Don't forget, my fated opportunity is not inferior to yours, he declared proudly. The primordial beasts I could be considered a supreme treasure, far surpassing his present cultivation level. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you, because you have defeated it, in order to protect the life of a host like me. This eye has now fallen truly under my control. As he said this, a ray of light shot out from Hong Tianbu's forehead. It was incredibly fast, and there was no way for him to dodge at all. He shot onto Ling Han. Ha! Die! He charged over, and after being shot by the primordial beast's eye, his body would instantly turn to stone. He only had to calmly follow up with another attack, and he would be able to easily take Ling Han's life. It was too simple. Under the crushing pressure of a major tier, even if you were a supreme prodigy, so what? It was guaranteed that you would die completely. Pong! As expected, with a palm strike, Ling Han was instantly turned into a shower of blood. Hong Tianbu retracted his hand and stood, laughing loudly. However, at the same time he also felt some regret. It could be said that he had hated this opponent for many years, but he had killed him all of a sudden, which made him feel like his hatred had not been vented. However, it was good that he was dead. This was a matter of the past, after all. However, in the eyes of the masses, Hong Tianbu had suddenly become mad. He blasted randomly at the air, and then revealed expressions of disdain. What are you so proud of? Could this ideal son-in-law of the Heaven Wolf Imperial clan be a little out of his mind? He actually dared to come out and embarrass himself. Faced with this scene, the Eastern Sea Venerate also revealed a hint of anger. Why was Hong Tianbu so unreliable at this moment? In truth, he also had a very high opinion of Hong Tianbu. In fact, he had even thought of going to the main branch to ask for a saint-level great herb to treat Hong Tianbu and remove all of his hidden ailments. Of course, he could not possibly ask for the whole saint-level great herb, but if it was just a small portion, there would be no problem. But now, Hong Tianbu was actually behaving in such an unbearable manner, which caused anger to rise up in his heart. Was there any need to nurture this kind of guy who would go mad? However, Venerate tier elites were Venerate tier elites after all, so their eyes were naturally sharp. The more he looked, the more he felt that something was off. Then, he suddenly came to a realization. It was not that Hong Tianbu had gone mad, but he had been affected by Ling Han's illusion technique. Impressive, being able to affect his opponent with a gap of a major cultivation level. Even he had not been able to tell at the first instant. In fact, he had not even seen Ling Han make a move. What kind of illusion was this? Tianbu, don't be careless. He opened his mouth and shouted loudly. As he spoke, a sliver of divine sense also shot into Hong Tianbu's mind. The Venerate tier was too powerful. This sliver of divine sense entered into his mind, and immediately destroyed the illusion as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Hong Tianbu faltered for a moment before coming to his senses. He couldn't help but reveal a humiliated and furious expression. He had the advantage of a major tier over Ling Han, yet his mind had actually been affected by Ling Han. This was a great humiliation. In a battle of true self-tier against core formation tier, he was actually unable to decide the battle with a single strike, and was instead bewitched. Die! He roared loudly, and charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. The black light of illusion activated, and who cares if you were prepared or not? This was the celestial light that he had obtained from the Black Heaven Temple. Being worthy of the notice of Pseudo-Emperor Doga, how could it be bad? Hong Tianbu was immediately hit again, and began his performance. The Eastern Sea Venerate was just about to move again, yet he suddenly saw a gust of wind from a palm strike sweep over. There was an endless power of regulation, and even he had no choice but to deal with it carefully. Hurriedly, he retreated, and naturally had no more time to deal with it for Hong Tianbu. The Nine Mountains Venerate withdrew his palm, and said calmly, "There's a limit to shamelessness." The Eastern Sea Venerate's chest rose and fell in fury, but he had indeed interfered in the battle between two juniors. Originally, if the Nine Mountains Venerate acted as if he didn't know, then everyone would be fooled, but after he was exposed, his expression naturally became ugly. Most importantly, some people had even activated Galaxy Network's live stream. As a Venerate tier elite of the Imperial clan, he actually interfered in the battle between two juniors. Moreover, he had been exposed in public. How humiliating! He humphed and crossed his arms behind his back. By now, he finally knew that the Nine Mountains Venerate had no intention of compromising at all, but rather knew that Ling Han had a way to oppose the true self tier. This was boosting Ling Han's popularity. Previously, Ling Han had killed core formation tier when he had been in cauldron forging tier. Now, in the core formation tier, and even only in the late stage of the core formation tier at that, he could match the true self tier. This naturally caused Ling Han's reputation to rise greatly. Probably, a considerable number of imperial clans would come over to fight over this son-in-law, right? Fourth great-grandfather, Di Hailan said worriedly. It's fine. The Eastern Sea Venerate waved his hand. That brat only has one illusion technique, no matter how hard he tries. Though this can affect Tianbu, the instincts of Tianbu are still present. When he encounters danger, he would naturally counterattack. With the advantage that Tianbu has of a major tier in cultivation level, he would be able to easily kill that brat. Hearing his words, Di Hailan instantly looked relieved. Eastern Sea Venerate paused for a moment, then continued. Furthermore, Tianbu is also a supreme prodigy, and also has the advantage of a major tier in cultivation level. The effects of illusions on him would become smaller and smaller, until they disappear, and by then, Needless to say, if a true self-tier cultivator could go all out, what core formation tier cultivator would be able to survive? This sparring match of the Nine Suns Holy Land was broadcasted live through Galaxy Network and spread throughout the entire universe. Originally, this was only a battle between juniors, and could not possibly attract the attention of mighty figures. However, one side had a core formation tier while the other side had a true self tier. Furthermore, it was the side of the core formation tier that was on the upper hand now. This was a different story. More and more people were paying attention to this battle, and in the discussion area below the livestream it was even livelier. It can't be, right? A true self-tier cultivator is actually unable to kill a core formation tier cultivator? Hehe. Allow me to laugh for 5 minutes first, a newcomer said. Hehe. Then just laugh for an hour. There really is such an inconceivable thing. Hey. Is there really such an inconceivable thing? Of course. This guy is Ling Han. That's right. He's the guy who's still alive and kicking even though he's being hunted by the Battle God Palace. No wonder the Battle God Palace couldn't kill him. As a core formation tier, he is able to stand against a true self tier, and the Battle God Palace would have to send out spirit transformation tier assassins to succeed. However, Ling Han's battle prowess isn't on par with the true self tier. Rather, it's because he possesses a precious tool or some secret technique that can create illusions and bewitch the true self tier. If it's an illusion, it can't last for long. There will always be a way to resolve it. That's right. At that time, how would Ling Han be able to block him? A unanimous conclusion was reached on the Galaxy Network, and that was when Hong Tianbu solved the problem of the illusion. That would be the instant of Ling Han's defeat. Donglin Imperial Clan. Big sister, big sister, big sister. Qi Mengshan ran over energetically. Look at Galaxy Network's livestream. My brother-in-law is currently fighting with a true self-tier. Qi Minghan's pretty face immediately darkened. At this moment, she was no longer wearing a white veil, revealing an extremely beautiful face. She was definitely not inferior to the red-haired beauty on the island of the Sea of Blood. She was indeed worthy of being called the third most beautiful woman in the galaxy. In fact, she was completely qualified to be called the #1 beauty in the galaxy. She glared at him and said, "What nonsense are you spouting? Didn't you dual cultivate with that guy? What is it? You've already been devoured, yet you don't even get a title?" Qi Mengshan asked, her eyes wider. "Fuck, this damn child." Qi Menghan immediately delivered a harsh knock, instantly causing Qi Mengshan to grab her head and cry out in pain. "Qi Menghan, just because you were born a few years earlier than me, your cultivation level is higher than mine. You keep bullying me," the little girl shouted. "Just you wait. When my cultivation level catches up to you, I'll immediately marry you off." Qi Menghan was rendered speechless. Were they really born from the same parents? Why were their personalities so different? However, Ling Han was battling a true self-tier cultivator. She couldn't help but be moved. She summoned a servant and had him connect to the Galaxy Network, then project the live broadcast. If Ling Han was here, he would definitely be puzzled. Why didn't the Imperial clan use Galaxy Network? It was obviously so useful. Seeing Ling Han toy around with Hong Tianbu with his illusions, she couldn't help but smile, bright and beautiful. "Sister, are you really moved?" Qi Mengshan asked softly from the sidelines. She was a mischievous little girl. "Don't spout nonsense," Qi Menghan rebuked. She only admired this young man very much, and indeed had the idea of taking Ling Han into the Donglin Imperial clan. However, it was definitely impossible that she would be the one to marry him. She had great aspirations and wanted to break through to the Imperial path. She had not considered romantic matters at all. Qi Mengshan cocked her head and pondered for a moment. Then, she suddenly reached over and wrapped her arms around Qi Menghan's back. At the same time, she continued to grope Qi Menghan, saying, "Qi Menghan's breasts are already so big, so she can finally get married." Fall. Hong Tianbu was a prodigy after all. Moreover, he had the advantage of a major tier in cultivation level, and he also had the primordial beast's eye inside him. Thus, the time that the illusion could take effect on him was becoming shorter and shorter. At first, the illusion could last for about half a minute, but very soon it became 20 seconds, 10 seconds, and finally, there were only 2 or 3 seconds left. However, the black light of illusion was also overwhelmingly awesome. Even if Hong Tianbu had already been hit many times, it was still effective. However, the time limit was only 2 seconds or so, but it didn't decrease any further. However, once the number of times increased, the pattern of the black light of illusion on Ling Han's celestial core would become dimmer and dimmer. When it completely dimmed, it could no longer be used. After all, this was not a celestial technique that he had cultivated himself. They couldn't play any longer. That's right, Ling Han was just playing around. "Ling Han!" Hong Tianbu roared in fury. In just a short while, he had already fallen into dozens of illusions, experiencing the ups and downs of life. Sometimes he would become successful in illusions, but at other times his parents, children, and grandchildren would all die, and he would become a jinx that would cause the deaths of all those around him. Thus, he alternated between laughing and crying, appearing extremely disheveled. He had powerful strength, yet was unable to use it fully. Who could understand this kind of helplessness? Die! He leaped up high, and regulations materialized, forming into a god tool that stabbed towards Ling Han. Ling Han didn't move or dodge, and he simply crossed his arms behind his back. His demeanor was as lofty as could be. What? He actually didn't dodge. Hiss! Hong Tianbu wasn't affected by an illusion this time. Furthermore, this attack has already been launched. Even if Hong Tianbu is under the effects of an illusion, he should still be able to attack directly. With the battle prowess of a true self-tier, he would still be able to easily kill him. Sigh, he's too conceited. Does he really think that he can rival those at the true self-tier just by relying on illusion techniques? Childish. On the Galaxy network, countless people also witnessed this scene in real time. They all shook their heads, thinking that Ling Han was definitely going to die. However, when Hong Tianbu's attack landed, boom, an earth chi surged out and turned into a furious dragon. Pong! Hong Tianbu's attack instantly landed on the earth dragon. Although he had just broken through to the true self-tier, his battle prowess surpassed that of ordinary cultivators at the early stage of the true self-tier. With this attack, the earth dragon instantly shattered, no longer able to withstand a single blow from him. However, after this exchange, the might of his attack had mostly dissipated. Ling Han shot out a punch and instantly dispersed this burst of power from Hong Tianbu. Fuck! 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 Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked speechless. This time, Ling Han didn't use any illusion techniques, but rather blocked Hong Tianbu's attack head-on. Heavens! How could this be possible? A core formation tier cultivator actually had the ability to face a true self-tier cultivator head-on. Furthermore, looking at how Ling Han was acting, he was really too relaxed. It was as if he was the true self-tier, easily dispersing the attack of a core formation tier. I know, someone said. That's Earth Chi. What Earth Chi? That's right, Earth Chi. Every planet has ley lines, and within the ley lines, there is Earth Chi, which is actually heaven and earth energy. However, only formations grandmasters can use it. Hiss, what you mean is that Ling Han is actually a formations grandmaster? Precisely. The Galaxy network was in an uproar, and quite a number of people were grabbing their heads, exclaiming in disbelief. Ling Han was a genius of martial arts, freakish to the point of being freakish, but it was this kind of freak that was actually a formations grandmaster. Would you let others live? Hong Tianbu was also taken aback. He stared blankly at Ling Han, his eyes filled with shock and confusion. Ling Han was actually a formations grandmaster. Holy fuck! Hong Tianbu had also studied formation techniques before, but this was only limited to the mortal level. After stepping onto the celestial path, formation techniques were far too time-consuming, and they also required the support of powerful spiritual power. Thus, he placed all of his focus on cultivation. Even so, he still felt that there was not enough time. But what about Ling Han? Comparisons would drive one crazy. He was not willing to accept this, nor could he accept that the gap between the two of them would be so overwhelmingly wide. Die! 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 His fighting spirit was completely ignited. At this moment, he only had one thought, and that was to kill Ling Han. Once Ling Han died, all the humiliation he had suffered would disappear without a trace. And no matter how outstanding Ling Han was, he would only become a piece of history. Ling Han was calm and unperturbed. He extracted the Earth Chi and transformed it into the Earth Dragon. And this time, the two Earth Dragons appeared at the same time. Even if Hong Tianbu was stronger than the average true self-tier cultivator, so what? It was impossible for him to destroy two Earth Dragons in one go. Instead, he was countered by the Earth Dragons, which made him feel extremely terrible. The expressions of the Eastern Sea Venerate and D. Hylon were both extremely terrible. This was a scene that they could never have imagined. A dignified true self-tier cultivator couldn't do anything to a core formation tier cultivator, and even showed signs of being countersuppressed. This was a fantasy story. It wasn't that Hong Tianbu was too weak. No matter how weak a true self-tier cultivator was, he was still a true self-tier cultivator. He could crush a core formation tier cultivator single-handedly, but Ling Han was too freakish. He was actually a formations grandmaster, an existence that could match a spiritual transformation tier cultivator. Thus, it wouldn't be strange for Hong Tianbu to be blocked or even defeated. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that Ling Han was still limited by his own cultivation level and unable to fully unleash his powerful spiritual power, he could have even insta-killed Hong Tianbu with a single strike. Hong! 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 Hong Tianbu continued to attack, yet he was completely unable to break through the Earth Dragon's blockade. Under Ling Han's control, 5 Earth Dragons appeared at the same time, launching attacks at Hong Tianbu. 5 Earth Dragons. This was equivalent to 5 true self-tier cultivators. Even if Hong Tianbu was quite extraordinary, he was still someone who had damaged his foundations, after all. Forcibly breaking through to true self-tier would definitely lead to an evil consequence that his battle prowess at the same cultivation level was not strong enough. Thus, when all 5 Earth Dragons appeared at the same time, he would not be able to hold on any longer. He was outmatched. He was overcome with grief. He was a dignified true self-tier cultivator, yet he was no match for a core formation tier cultivator. He had lost all face. However, defeat was still better than being defeated and dying. Hong Tianbu was already thinking of retreating. He knew that after retreating, he would no longer have the chance to defeat Ling Han. However, if he didn't retreat, he would die. He naturally didn't want to die even more. However, Ling Han had no intention of sparing Hong Tianbu's life. "You have come to kill me, so you must be prepared to die as well." He shot out the black light of illusion, and Hong Tianbu immediately fell into an illusion. Then, the 5 Earth Dragons took advantage of the opening to attack him. The disadvantage of the Earth Dragon was that it was not agile. Against a real true self-tier, it would only be effective for defense, but if it wanted to hurt someone, the latter would just have to dodge, which was very easy. However, the Earth Dragon added with the black light of illusion was a completely different story. 2 seconds, wasn't that enough time for the Earth Dragons to completely outflank their target? When Hong Tianbu broke free from the illusion, he had to face the mad barrage of attacks from the 5 Earth Dragons, forcing him to use his trump card, and use the primordial beast's eye to petrify and shatter the Earth Dragons. But the problem was that the Earth Dragons were only formed from Earth Chi, and did not have any life. So be it if they exploded. Ling Han could easily create another Earth Dragon, and his attacks would not stop at all. At the risk of sustaining some injuries, Hong Tianbu forcefully barged out of the Earth Dragon's encirclement. However, the black light of illusion attacked, and he once again fell into the illusion. When he struggled free, he was once again surrounded by the Earth Dragons. In everyone's eyes, Ling Han didn't need to do it himself. He could simply summon the Earth Dragons and deal with Hong Tianbu. Who could compare to such a prodigy? "Sister, just marry him. I don't think this kind of brother-in-law can be found no matter how hard you try." Among the members of the Donglin Imperial clan, the mischievous Qi Mengshan began to persuade again. Seeing that Qi Menghan didn't answer her at all, she placed her hands on her hips and said, "Let me tell you, Qi Menghan, if I weren't too young, I wouldn't have given such a good man to you." Qi Menghan placed a hand on her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. Why was this little sister of hers giving her such a headache? Can't you act like a little girl in her teens? Why are you so mature? The Eastern Sea Venerate frowned. He couldn't sit by and watch any longer. Otherwise, Hong Tianbu would definitely die. However, just as he was about to make a move, he saw the 9 Mountains Venerate had already stepped in front of him. "9 Mountains, move aside," he declared darkly. "What a joke. This is my territory, and you think you're worthy of shouting here?" 9 Mountains Venerate said coldly. "Hong, if Hong Tianbu dies, I definitely won't let the matter go," the Eastern Sea Venerate threatened. "N, are you trying to scare me?" The 9 Mountains Venerate directly summoned the 9 Suns Parasol. Although the Saint Tool hadn't awakened, merely a sliver of saintly might circulated, which was enough to give a Venerate tier a headache. "Fuck you." The Eastern Sea Venerate was completely dumbfounded at this moment. "I've only said one word, and you've already taken out the Saint Tool. Is that appropriate?" He was protective of his own people, but compared with 9 Mountains Venerate, the two of them weren't on the same level at all. "Just obediently stay there. Otherwise, I won't mind detaining you here forever," the 9 Mountains Venerate said calmly. However, his tone was extremely firm. The Eastern Sea Venerate was rendered speechless, and could only tremble in fury. "Return to the main branch and ask the Saint to bring the Imperial weapon to flatten this place?" What a joke. Even Imperial clan elites couldn't act recklessly. Even if they mobilized an Imperial weapon, they would have to be reasonable and justified. Oh, you, a true self-tier elite, bullied a core formation tier. You didn't win and were killed, yet you still want a saint to take out an Imperial weapon to avenge you. If word got out, wouldn't you be laughed at by others? In the whole universe, the Heaven Wolf Imperial clan was not the only Imperial clan. The Imperial clan could not do as they liked, simply suppressing all negative public opinion. Fourth great-grandfather. Di Hailan was getting anxious. Hong Tianjin's situation was getting worse and worse. Shut up! The Eastern Sea Venerate shouted. He then looked at the Nine Mountains Venerate and said, "Fine, I admit defeat. I can guarantee that the Heaven Wolf Imperial clan will never cause trouble for this brat again." Yet the Nine Mountains Venerate scoffed and said, "If you want to target that brat, just make your move. Without experiencing some hardships, how could that brat be able to grow? However, this battle must be fought to the end. Fuck, I've never seen anyone like you before. How can you be so shameless?" This was a member of the Imperial clan. Did they really think that they were so easily offended? However, the Nine Mountains Venerate had already made his stand clear. The Saint Tool was also on the verge of awakening at any moment, and the Eastern Sea Venerate didn't dare to provoke it at all. Otherwise, he would definitely die here today. To be killed by a Saint Tool, there was definitely no way he could be saved. His eyes were spitting fire, while his hands were tightly clenched. Nine Mountains, are you planning to push the Nine Suns' holy land into a fire pit? What a joke. This is a fair battle. What is it? Does your D-clan have any objections? The Nine Mountains Venerate said calmly, not feeling threatened at all. Good, good, good. The Eastern Sea Venerate said good 3 times. He had already decided that after this, he would go to the main branch. No matter what, he had to ask an Imperial son to come out and kill Ling Han. In a fair battle, so there would be no argument. Hong Tianbu was filled with utter despair. His retreat was fruitless, so he placed his hopes on the Eastern Sea Venerate. Thus, he naturally heard the conversation between the Eastern Sea Venerate and the Nine Mountains Venerate. The two Venerates had absolutely no intention of concealing their conversation. The Eastern Sea Venerate could not make a move, and he was also trapped, so he could only fight all out. The result of fighting all out was naturally death. He didn't want to die, and he more so didn't want to die in Ling Han's hands. This was the greatest opponent he had faced in his entire life. He would truly die with remaining grievances. But so what? Under the frenzied barrage of attacks from the 5 Earth Dragons, he could only parry. Furthermore, he was still unable to parry, and could do nothing at all. The injuries on his body were also getting more and more serious, continuously spurting out blood. In some places, even his bones were revealed, and his appearance was too horrible to look at. He was already going all out, extracting the regulations of heaven and earth, turning them into his strongest attack. With such might, if it landed on Ling Han, then even with the strength of Ling Han's physique, and with the primal chaos celestial core being able to disperse the power that he was hit with, even if he did not die, he would still be severely injured. But the problem now was that he did not have the chance to hit Ling Han at all. He really could only wait for death. Tianbu! Tianbu! Di Hailan shouted from the sidelines, but she also knew that she would be of no help at all if she just called out like this. Thus, she looked at Ling Han and said, "If you dare to kill Tianbu, I will capture all your family and friends, and kill them one by one in front of you, and then kill you." A powerful killing intent instantly rose up in Ling Han's heart. This was his reverse scale, and touching it would result in death. "You want to kill my family and friends? Then I'll kill you first." Ling Han summoned another 5 Earth Dragons. In the previous battle, he had already revealed his ability to summon 10 Earth Dragons at the same time. Thus, he was not afraid of others finding out now. In any case, his true trump card was as many as 16. Hong Tianbu couldn't even withstand 5 Earth Dragons, let alone 10. He was completely outmatched, and was blasted into smithereens. This time, he had really died, and there was no longer the slightest possibility of revival. Tianbu! Di Hailan released a shrill cry. She really liked Hong Tianbu. Otherwise, with her identity as a member of the Imperial clan, How could she have married a person with no background like Hong Tianbu? Good, good, good. The Eastern Sea Venerate's aged face was livid. 9 mountains. You will definitely regret what happened today. Farewell. The 9 mountains Venerate said calmly. With a wave of his hand, the Eastern Sea Venerate grabbed Di Hailon and tore a rip into the void. The 9 mountains Venerate smiled at Ling Han. He was extremely satisfied with this disciple. Just ask the imperial sons and imperial daughters of the world. Which one of them could counterattack and kill a true self-tier cultivator in the core formation tier? Especially when Ling Han was only in the late stage of core formation tier. Don't be arrogant and don't be proud. Focus on cultivating and strive to advance into the true self-tier as soon as possible, he said. All right. Ling Han nodded. Go on. The 9 mountains Venerate waved his hand and took the lead to leave. He had been in seclusion at first and had been awakened by the aura of a Venerate tier. Now that the opponent was defeated, he naturally had to return to continue his seclusion. If he could become a saint, he would become Ling Han's sturdiest support and assist the strongest disciple in breaking through to the imperial path. The crowd dispersed, but they were still discussing spiritedly. Meanwhile, it was as if Lu Qi had been beaten, and he looked extremely despondent. Was it really that difficult to kill a core formation tier late-stage cultivator? Ling Han returned in a flash, and continued to teach the secret techniques of the Battle God Palace to the 2 women and the large black dog. However, only a few days later, the Buddhist race of the West Heavenly Realm also sent someone over, and made the same request, demanding that the 9 Sons Holy Land hand over Ling Han. This time, the 9 Mountains Venerate didn't even show himself. Several sect master elites aggressively rebuked the people from the Buddhist race. Couldn't be helped. The Buddhist race of the West Heavenly Realm could only be considered a holy land at most. With how 9 Sons Holy Land had always been assertive, how could they possibly admit defeat? When the news spread out, it naturally caused another round of heated discussions on the Galaxy Network. They both admired Ling Han's ability to cause trouble, and at the same time, praised the 9 Yang Holy Land for protecting their disciple. Ling Han didn't care too much. After his lessons ended, he couldn't sit still any longer. The late stage of the core formation tier wasn't cultivated in seclusion. He had to obtain more high-level spirit diagrams, extract the regulations of heaven and earth from them, and brand them onto the celestial core, completing this stage of cultivation. Of course, theoretically speaking, one could break through with just 3 inscriptions. By now, Ling Han had already reached 5 inscriptions. In fact, he was already qualified to advance to the 4th stage of the core formation tier, the liquefied gold core, to lay the foundations for the true self tier. However, if he broke through now, it would be too much of a waste. Ling Han was someone who was going to attempt breaking through to the imperial path, so he naturally had to cultivate every cultivation level to perfection. There were indeed spirit diagrams sold on the Galaxy Network, but their level was too low. There was absolutely no way that Ling Han would waste the space on his celestial core. Thus, if he wanted to obtain a high-level spirit diagram, he could only go out. The 9 Mountains Venerate was willing to open up the spirit diagrams of the Holy Land to Ling Han, but not one of them was Great Emperor tier level. Though Ling Han had learnt it, he was not in a rush to break through now, so he just left it for now. However, if he didn't have a target, he couldn't just run around randomly, right? Though Ling Han was very awesome, he was only a core formation tier after all, and the opponents that he had provoked. There were already 2 imperial clans alone. He checked on the Galaxy Network every day to see if any ancient site had appeared. There was definitely, but the level was too low. They didn't even have sect master level, so they definitely wouldn't attract him. However, another few days passed, and finally, a big piece of news spread out. The true Dragon Abyss was about to open. The entire world was in an uproar. Even the imperial clans couldn't remain calm. Why? Were there some supreme precious treasures hidden here? Could be said that there was, but it could also be said that there wasn't. That was because what they were fighting over in the true Dragon Abyss was not treasures in the traditional sense, cultivation techniques, celestial techniques, but rather fortune. Fortune was something that could not be grasped, but it did indeed exist. For example, if you faced a choice at a crossroads that could lead you to hell, or it could lead you to heaven. Those with great fortune would subconsciously make the most beneficial choice. Moreover, this fortune was not only applicable to individuals. In fact, it could even benefit the sects and clans. For sects or forces that were flourishing with fortune, there would be prodigies joining them and freakish prodigies emerging. They were destined to rise up, and no matter what, they could not be stopped. Additionally, one would only need to cultivate earnestly to become a venerate, but becoming a saint would definitely need fortune, and becoming an emperor would also need to gather the great fortune of heaven and earth. In the true dragon abyss there was the true dragon of fortune. Those who obtained it could increase the fortune of themselves and the force behind them, and would be favored by heaven and earth. When Ling Han found out, he hurriedly investigated the exact situation of the true dragon abyss. Every time the true dragon abyss opened, there would be 6 true dragons of fortune, which belonged to the 6 cultivation levels from foundation building tier to minor advanced tier. Meanwhile, cultivators could only enter into the area corresponding to their cultivation level, and whether one could obtain the true dragons of fortune would depend on one's abilities and natural talent. Was there a spirit diagram inside? Ling Han thought. However, whether there was a spirit diagram or not, this trip was obviously necessary. The 9 mountains venerate supported him so much. He naturally had to do something for the 9 suns' holy land. Furthermore, the true dragon of fortune was also greatly beneficial for Ling Han. Merely for this reason he had to go. Deciding to go was one matter, but how to go was another matter. Though Ling Han never admitted it, in truth, there were indeed a great many forces that wanted to get rid of him. There were some that truly had enmity with him, such as the Heaven Wolf Imperial Clan and the Buddhist sect of the West Heavenly Realm. There were also those that actually did not have any enmity with him. They were only wary of his talent and wanted to kill him. There had been no emperor in the world for tens of millions of years. Theoretically speaking, the door to becoming an emperor had already been opened. Any prodigy would be qualified to attempt it, and a freakish guy like Ling Han would drive a great many people to despair. Killing Ling Han was equivalent to eliminating a powerful competitor for their own juniors. He was sure that there would be a great many elites willing to make a move. Thus, Ling Han had to take it easy. There are a total of 6 true dragons of fortune in the true dragon abyss, so it's also divided into 6 regions, corresponding to the 6 cultivation levels from foundation building tier to minor advanced tier. In other words, sect master elites will also participate. Thankfully, I won't clash with them head-on. Otherwise, no matter how lucky I am, if I want to compete with them, the possibility of me being killed would definitely be higher. The large black dog and I are in the core formation tier. Of course, we're entering the territory of the core formation tier. Luan Xing and Hunyo are still in the cauldron forging tier, so if we go to the true dragon abyss, we'll definitely be separated. They are both 9 cauldrons fusion cauldron, and have also mastered a considerable number of imperial techniques and saint techniques. Even against an imperial son and imperial daughter, they may not be at a disadvantage. Moreover, it's said that the true dragon abyss also contains great herbs, as well as inheritances left behind by predecessors. Even if one can't obtain the true dragon of fortune, there are still many benefits. Ling Han discussed with the Empress, Hunyo, and the large black dog, and decided to set out immediately. This kind of great fortune was definitely not something that could be obtained through hard cultivation. Something like fortune was bestowed by the heavens. If one missed it, it was possible that he would never be able to obtain it again. Ling Han communicated with the ley lines, and with a twist of earth chi, they had already arrived at the transfer formation on the 9 suns planet. Right now, the 9 mountains venerate was cultivating in seclusion, so he didn't have time to bring Ling Han and the others through the galaxy. Thus, Ling Han and the others could only rely on themselves to travel. Thankfully, the opening of the true dragon abyss would need a very long time, so there was no need to worry that it would not make it in time. The 3 people and 1 dog were still traveling at night, and only when their bodies could no longer bear it did they stop to rest and recover. In this manner, they endlessly traveled through the galaxy, and after spending more than 3 months, they finally arrived at the true dragon abyss. The true dragon abyss was on the heavenly dragon planet. This was a damaged great planet, and was located at the borders of the 4 great heavenly realms. possessed a very special status. According to legends, the first and only true dragon in the world was born here, and was overseer in the heart of the entire galaxy. Thus, the heavenly dragon planet did not belong to any one of the heavenly realms. However, at some point in history, a great battle had erupted here, blasting the heavenly dragon planet into bits, turning it into a damaged planet. At the same time, it also allowed the true dragon abyss to appear in the world for the first time. The true dragon was an existence that was comparable to the great emperor, and dragons were the symbol of great fortune in the first place. Thus, the true dragon was born here and died here, as if it had formed a whirlpool of fortune of heaven and earth. Every once in a while, a true dragon of fortune would be nurtured. Of course, this period of time was also astonishingly long, numbering in the tens of millions of years. And every time the true dragon abyss opened, it spoke of a fact. The heaven and earth had already prepared themselves to welcome the birth of the next emperor. This was the greatest significance. However, looking through history of all the ancestral kings that had been born after the appearance of the true dragon abyss, only 50% had ever been to the true dragon abyss. In other words, even if one didn't obtain the great fortune of the true dragon abyss, it actually wouldn't have any effect on becoming an emperor. Because the heavenly dragon planet had already been shattered, it was far worse off than celestial sea planet. There was no longer a sliver of life here, because without the protection of the atmosphere, mortals would not be able to survive at all. Thus, those who could come here had to be at least in the foundation building tier. Ling Han, the empress, Hu Niu and the dog didn't directly arrive at the heavenly dragon planet. Instead, they first arrived at a nearby great planet, then boarded a warship, crossed the galaxy, and arrived at the heavenly dragon planet. For this, they also paid a huge sum of Dao stones. Looking from the galaxy, there was a massive fissure on the heavenly dragon planet that lay across the entire damaged planet, like an eye that was presently opening. That was the true dragon abyss. When this eye was completely open, one could enter. The warship landed, and Ling Han came out. He saw that this originally barren broken planet was extremely lively. There were people everywhere, and they were all waiting for the true dragon abyss to open. Ling Han and the others kept an extremely low profile mainly because of Ling Han and the large black dog. It could be said that there were definitely several times more people who wanted to kill them than those who liked them. In this place, the aura of Venerate tier would appear and disappear intermittently. In fact, occasionally there would even be saintly might spreading out. If the power of a great emperor suddenly exploded here and completely destroyed the heavenly dragon planet, then it could instantly cause the overall level of cultivation of the entire galaxy to decline by tens of thousands of years, or even more. Now, there were too many prodigies and elites gathered here. Low-key. Ling Han and the large black dog encouraged each other. Ling Han and the large black dog didn't provoke anyone, and the large black dog also suppressed the urge to steal their underpants. The man and dog both hid in a simple tent. However, how could such provocative beings like them keep a low profile for too long? I'd better go out and take a look. That's right. In any case, we have already changed our appearances, and even our soul fluctuations have changed. We would definitely not be recognized. And let's go. The man and dog walked out boldly just like that. Because there were too many prodigies gathered here, there was no shortage of people with money and treasures. Thus, some people simply set up a stall here. At the beginning, there had even been an incident of robbery, but this had caused a saint to speak up, saying that rules had to be observed in all matters. Thus, the whole marketplace became very well behaved. Even the imperial clans dared not act recklessly. Saints were just that freakish. Their words were as effective as law. Ling Han strolled around with the large black dog. The large black dog had been holding back for a few days, and instantly turned into a chatterbox, chattering non-stop. There was still quite a lot of good stuff here. In fact, there were a considerable number of high-grade items that had been obtained from ancient ruins. However, no one knew how to use them now, but once they figured it out, the buyers exclaimed that they had made a killing. Ling Han and the large black dog also wanted to try their luck. As they walked, Ling Han also used his eye technique to estimate the age of these ancient items. Brother, come and take a look. There are a lot of treasures here. A stall keeper waved at Ling Han. There was a pile of things laid out in front of him, including sabers and swords, as well as exquisite small towers, white jade fans, and so on. Ling Han walked over and flipped through them one by one. "Brother, look at this." He spread out his hands and handed over a dagger. "This has just been taken out of the ancient site and is an ancient item that is at least several million years old. Just look at these veined patterns. TSK. They conform to the Tao of heaven and earth." The large black dog immediately snatched it over. He had now transformed into a large man, but he still couldn't change his habit as a dog. He sniffed with his nose, then said to Ling Han, "Little Han, this is genuine old stuff." The stall keeper couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. "What's wrong with you? You don't even look with your eyes, yet you're sniffing with your nose. Are you born in the year of the dog?" He wasn't born in the year of the dog, he was indeed a dog. Ling Han activated his eye technique and said, "Hee, the layer of rust outside is indeed an old thing." How smart was the large black dog? He was the ancestor of trickery in the first place, so he immediately understood after hearing Ling Han's words. He immediately tossed the dagger onto the ground before grabbing the stall keeper and saying, "Good one. You actually dared to trick Grandpa Dog. Are you really a dog?" That person spread out his hands and smiled awkwardly. In the first place, doing business here was based on one's insight. If one had good insight, they could avoid being deceived or even pick up real treasures. However, it was your own fault for having poor insight and having bought fake goods. Who could you blame? Old Black, don't drop down to his level. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively. "Humph. Consider yourself lucky." The large black dog withdrew his hand. He and Ling Han had to keep a low profile now. Otherwise, with his petty nature, how could he possibly let go of someone who wanted to trick him so easily? Ling Han searched through the stall. Needless to say, the counterfeiting ability of this stall keeper was quite strong. Each item was exuding an ancient aura, but if one looked closely with an eye technique, they were actually all new items deliberately made old. However, their craftsmanship was extremely good, and ordinary people really wouldn't be able to tell. He swept an eye over them before withdrawing his gaze. Everything here had been faked, so there was nothing interesting about it. "Old Black, let's go." "All right." The large black dog nodded, then glared harshly at the stall keeper as a warning. They walked, but they had not walked too far when Ling Han suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Little Han, what are you doing?" the large black dog asked in confusion. "Let's go back." Ling Han's expression became serious. The large black dog faltered for a moment, then looked excited. "Then there really is treasure? I don't know whether it's a treasure or not, but I did miss it," Ling Han said with a nod. Let's go." The man and dog returned. However, in such a short while, there were already other people watching the stall. They were two men, and they were both very young. They were handsome and energetic, exuding a captivating aura. One of them was at the core formation tier, while the other was at the true self tier. Moreover, he wasn't just newly advanced into the true self tier. He was at the consummate level of the true self tier. When Ling Han observed him, he also turned around to glance at him, and his gaze was so piercing that Ling Han felt a little pain. The other core formation tier cultivator also turned around, and when he saw Ling Han, he was disdainful because now that Ling Han had disguised himself, he naturally wouldn't recognize that this was the most popular Galaxy Network celebrity. The large black dog didn't care about this. To him, treasure was the most important. "Make way." It squeezed through, then said to Ling Han, "Little Han, come and pick." Seeing that the two people had come again, the stall keeper's expression involuntarily darkened. "You guys are here to cause trouble, right?" Seeing the large black dog forcefully squeeze in, the other two frowned slightly. That man in the core formation tier had a bad temper, and immediately said, "What's the rush? Can't you come back after we leave? What is it? Is this place reserved by you people? Do I have to wait until you're satisfied before I can come here?" The large black dog immediately retorted. When it came to a matter of principle that involved precious treasures, he naturally would not give in. What if the treasure was picked up by someone else? The core formation tier cultivator was enraged, and he immediately stood up. Little Han, there's room. The large black dog, and Ling Han took advantage of the opening to fill his position, forcibly pushing the core formation tier cultivator out of the way. Fuck! The core formation tier cultivator was instantly enraged. Who are you two? You even dare to trifle with me, Lu Fong? He thought that after announcing his name, Ling Han and the large black dog would definitely feel respect, because he was ranked 76th in core formation tier on the Galaxy Network, and it could be claimed that he was inconceivably strong. However, he immediately discovered in fury that neither Ling Han nor the large black dog paid any attention to him. Instead, they were searching around in the stall. He was being completely ignored. How dare you? Lu Fong's eyes were spitting fire. Young people were hot-tempered in the first place, and he was also a top-notch prodigy that was ranked high on the Galaxy Network. Usually, he was used to being flattered and ingratiated, and now that he was being ignored like this, he immediately felt an urge to make a move. Junior brother. The true self-tier cultivator stretched out a hand to block, holding Lu Fong back. Senior brother too. Don't stop me. I want to teach them a good lesson, Lu Fong said angrily. Don't forget the rules here, the true self-tier said solemnly. His name was Tu Yong. Lu Fong shuddered upon hearing this. No matter how proud he was, he couldn't ignore the words of a saint. A single word from a saint was a law. He waved his hand angrily and made up his mind. As long as he left this market, he would definitely catch these two people and teach them a good lesson. Tu Yong, meanwhile, was calm and communicated through divine sense. In a while, no matter what he buys, we will raise the bid to compete with them. Lu Fong's eyes instantly lit up. This was indeed a good way to cause trouble for others. Haha, they had all come from the Holy Land, so which one of them wasn't rich and imposing? Have a bidding war with them, humph. Little Han, which one is it? The large black dog also asked through divine sense. Ling Han had already found his target. That was a Buddha that was about a foot tall. He communicated with the large black dog through divine sense, then said, "Don't be anxious. I don't think those two have any good intentions." That's right. They're not picky either. They keep staring at Grandpa Dog's behind. They definitely don't have any good intentions. The large black dog nodded, then bared his teeth. Grandpa Dog knows very well that these two brats have a lot of bad ideas. They must have seen what we wanted to buy, so they will compete over it with us to disgust us. This kind of little trick was left over from Grandpa Dog's bag of tricks. All right? Come, Grandpa Dog will play with them. The stall keeper's forehead was covered with cold sweat. He had really seen weirdos today, for people were surrounding his stall, yet all of them were silent. Are you guys playing a mime? How much is this? The large black dog suddenly picked up a mirror. Ancestor, you've finally made a sound. The stall keeper breathed a sigh of relief, but his expression was still strange. Didn't you fucking just say that it was a fake, and still asked me for a price? Are you deliberately messing with me? However, there was still Tu Yong and Lu Fong on the sidelines, so he could not call out too cheap a price. 1,000 Dao stones, he said. All right, I'll take it. The large black dog nodded and did not bargain. Wait! Lu Fong hurriedly stopped him. I offer 1,500. Give me the item. The large black dog turned around and said, Grandson, Grandpa Dog has already reached an agreement with the stall keeper. Why are you interrupting? Grandson? Lu Fong gritted his teeth, and the flames of fury in his eyes burned even brighter. However, he had not lost his reason. Fighting was not allowed here. The highest bidder wins. Don't you understand this logic? He said, pretending to be indifferent. Then, he asked the stall keeper, Don't you agree? Of course. Who would not want to take money given to him freely? The stall keeper hurriedly nodded. That's right. The highest bidder wins. He looked at the large black dog with slight anticipation. Come, don't be reserved. Please increase the bid. Little Han, what do you think about this one? The large black dog ignored him completely and pointed at another item. Fuck, why didn't you play by the rules? The large black dog's principle was that if he couldn't take advantage, then no one could. Thus, it definitely wouldn't raise the price for the stall keeper. In any case, Lu Fang was already at a disadvantage by offering this price, and it had already enjoyed itself to its heart's content. So how could the stall keeper enjoy himself further? Seeing that the large black dog's battle prowess was so weak, Lu Fang instantly felt as if he had punched cotton. He did not feel any force at all. Instead, he felt very uncomfortable, as if he was about to suffer internal injuries. "Boss, how much is this?" The large black dog pointed at a bronze mirror again. It had an ancient appearance and looked to be very old. "This, 10,000 Dao stones." The stall keeper hurriedly tried to save himself. Initially, he had only planned to ask for 3,000 for this copper mirror, but he could tell that there seemed to be signs of a fight between the two of them. Thus, he could completely ask a high price. "Oh!" The large black dog placed the bronze mirror back down. "Fuck!" The stall keeper was confused. "What do you mean?" "Ah! Is there anyone like you?" Even Lu Fang was a little confused. What was going on? He had never seen anyone play cards like this. The large black dog bared his teeth in a grin. "You're still too naive to make use of Grandpa Dog to earn money." It picked up another sword and asked, "What about this?" The stall keeper somewhat understood and answered honestly, 1,500 Dao stones. "I'll take it." The large black dog nodded. 2,000. Lu Fang said coldly. The large black dog directly stuffed the sword into his hands, then turned to the stall keeper and said, "Boss, do I count as a trustworthy support of the universe? Remember, I want half of the extra money earned today. Is it really good for you to say that?" The stall keeper was extremely embarrassed, and Lu Fang and Tu Yang's expressions also became very ugly. At first, they had wanted to discuss the other party, but why was it that they were the ones being disgusted now? Who was this guy? This was practically a fucking trap. The large black dog ordered a few more items. At first, Lu Fang even perked up and increased the bid a few times. But afterwards, he finally realized that it was actually the large black dog that was toying with him. "Fuck! I'm not bidding anymore. Let's see what you can do." "Oh, then I don't want it." The large black dog directly placed the item in his hand back onto the ground. "Holy shit! Is that even possible?" The stall keeper was stunned, and so were Lu Fang and Tu Yang. "How could there be someone as shameless as you? You had already asked for the price and said that you were going to buy it. Why did you go back on your word? What is it? Grandpa Dog hasn't paid yet, and you still want to rob me?" The large black dog looked at the stall keeper viciously. "When doing business, you have to behave and do your job. Don't you think so?" The stall keeper was already unable to speak. However, thanks to the large black dog, he had also earned a small profit. In truth, he was still a little grateful to the large black dog, but there was a deep feeling of awkwardness mixed in. At this moment, the large black dog finally picked up the Buddha statue and asked Lu Fang, "Boss, how much is this?" He just asked the price. "Why are you staring at me? Do I look so much like a fool?" A muscle twitched in Lu Fang's cheek. He wanted to hit someone again. Furthermore, previously, if he had only been slightly displeased with Ling Han and wanted to teach him a lesson, then now he really had the intention to kill the large black dog. Fuck, he was too despicable. 500 Dao stones, the stall keeper said. "I'll buy it," the large black dog said. Then he didn't pay and just looked at Lu Fang expectantly. You have gone too far." Lu Fang turned his head away. If he took another look at the large black dog, he would definitely lose control. "Here, the money is here." The large black dog directly tossed out 500 Dao stones. Then he hugged the Buddha statue in his arms. This time, no one could take it from him. "Why didn't you put it down?" Lu Fang and Tu Yang were both startled, but they were also smart people. Otherwise, how could they have cultivated to such a high cultivation level at such a young age? In fact, they had even squeezed into the top 100 of the galaxy network. Shit, they had been tricked. His target was this Buddha statue. Previously, he was simply trying to divert their attention, and then take advantage of the opening to make a move. Fuck! 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 This time, even Tu Yang was angered. Two mere core formation tier cultivators actually dared to toy with him? Who was he? The Tao child of the Azure Snow Holy Land. The supreme prodigy ranked 54th in true self tier on the Galaxy Network. The large black dog snickered. Pa! With a powerful toss, the Buddha statue instantly crashed into the ground, revealing multiple cracks. The stall keeper's face instantly paled, and he hurriedly said, "This has nothing to do with me. You were the one who accidentally broke it." "That's not right. This wasn't an accident. It was clearly deliberate." He was a little confused. He had just spent 500 Tao stones to buy it, and in the blink of an eye, it had been smashed. Just what kind of illness did he have? "Boss, this spirit tool of yours is far too fragile. It shattered at the first contact, so can it be used in a fight?" The large black dog asked with a smile. He then forcefully knocked on the stone statue, causing it to instantly shatter into pieces. This Buddha statue seemed to be solid, but the strange thing was that there was actually a clay figure in the center. The large black dog was overjoyed. This was definitely what Ling Han had said about seeing wrongly. Why is there another clay figurine here?" it asked, pretending to be surprised. How pretentious. Whether it was Tu Yang, Lu Fong, or that stall keeper, they could all see very clearly that the large black dog's act was really too fake. He was not the slightest bit surprised, and was grinning from ear to ear. "You dare to trick me," Lu Fong said darkly. By now, he naturally knew that the large black dog had long since known that there was something inside this Buddha statue, yet still tricked him into buying a pile of things that he did not need. Damn it, absolutely damn it. Moreover, though the Buddha statue was a fake and had shattered with a few throws, it was a bit unreasonable to say that one fake was used to conceal another fake, wasn't it? Thus, it was extremely possible that this clay figurine was really some kind of treasure. With such a discovery, even the stall keeper was shocked. He had indeed found this Buddha statue in a small shop. With his expertise in counterfeiting, he immediately discovered that the Buddha statue was indeed quite old, but it was definitely no treasure. He deliberately forged some patterns on it so that it would look pricier so that he could sell it for a high price. Who would have thought that he was the one who had misjudged? As it turned out, there was a clay figurine inside the Buddha statue. I'm not selling anymore," he said, beginning to act shamelessly. "Sure." The large black dog kicked the shards of the Buddha statue to him. "Give me back the 500 Tao stones." The stall keeper was rendered speechless. He was already shameless enough, but he had never thought that he would encounter someone even more shameless. Ling Han smiled, and said to Tu Yang and Lu Fong, "The two of you, farewell." Lu Fong did not speak, but his fists were already tightly clenched. He swore that he would definitely kill Ling Han and the large black dog, especially that shameless swindler. He would shatter him into 10,000 pieces. Ling Han and the large black dog didn't continue to wander around. They were very curious about this clay figure. What was its use? They left the marketplace, but they had not walked too far, when they saw that Lu Fong had already appeared in front of them, blocking their path, and Tu Yang had cut off their path of retreat. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking disdainful. Indeed, not only was he in the true self tier, but he was also in the consummate level of the true self tier. There was absolutely no need for him to take Ling Han and the large black dog seriously. He was far too powerful.